Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up every day with the weight of the world on your shoulders and the fear of hell in your soul? The sun barely rises above the horizon, and the cold already penetrates your bones like invisible needles. The straw mattress pricks your back as you toss and turn, trying to grab the last moments of rest. The smell of damp earth and old smoke permeates the only room in the shack you call home. Your wife breathes deeply beside you, clinging to the warmth of your body like a shipwrecked man to a plank. Time in your life slips through your fingers like water between the fingers of a clumsy fisherman, always escaping before you can enjoy it. Your name is Theron, and you are just another peasant on the feudal lord's land. The snores coming from the other side of the hut remind you that Agnes, your mother-in-law, is alive and well and ready for another day of cutting remarks. Your bare feet touch the dirt floor, and the dampness rises up your legs like a creeping plague. The stale bread from the night before will be your breakfast, accompanied by a sip of leftover beer. Between each bite, you feel the grains of sand that the miller failed to remove, scratching your already fragile teeth. Outside, the sky has a gray hue that seems to reflect God's own mood this morning. The doctor creaks when you open it, announcing your departure to the entire village like an indiscreet herald. The morning chill grabs your chest with invisible hands, making you huddle inside your worn tunic. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Your work tools wait leaning against the outside wall, a hoe with a chipped handle and a sickle that has seen better days. The neighbor's rooster crows, reminding you that you still don't have one of your own after yours mysteriously disappeared. You are sure it was the work of the evil one, but Agnes insists that it was just your incompetence in locking the chicken coop. The path to the field is marked by rocks and roots that seem to appear out of nowhere, just to torture your calloused feet. Sweat begins to bead on your forehead, mixing with the dust from the path and creating streaks of mud on your face. Other peasants wave discreetly as they head to their own plots of land, all bent over by the same burden. The weight of the hoe in your hands is familiar, like an old friend who never brings good news. Your land is small, just enough to feed your family and pay taxes to the feudal lord. The first strike of the hoe against the hard ground sends a wave of pain through your arms to your shoulders. You imagine that each blow to the ground is a small blow against the devil who is surely trying to harden the earth against you. Birds sing in the distance, indifferent to your efforts, as if mocking your earthly condition. When the sun reaches its highest point, heat replaces cold as your new daily torment. Your shirt sticks to your back like a second skin, heavy with sweat and accumulated dust. Your stomach growls, reminding you that the stale bread you ate in the morning is far from enough. You stop for a moment, stretching your back, which cracks like dry twigs in a fire. The sight of your hut in the distance brings mixed feelings, rest, and the inevitable encounter with Agnes. The problem is not just the hard work, but the feeling that it will never be enough to satisfy everyone. The consequences are visible in your calloused hands and the premature wrinkles that mark your still young face. You find a partial solution in the short breaks, in the moments of contemplation of the sky between one hoe stroke and another. At noon, you return home for the main meal, dragging your feet along the same winding path. The aroma of the thin stew fills your nostrils even before you enter the hut, making your stomach rumble in anticipation. Agnes stirs the cauldron with excessive vigor, as if punishing the vegetables for some imaginary sin. Your wife smiles timidly as she prepares the worn wooden bowls, already anticipating the impending confrontation. The soup is more water than substance, but you thank God anyway, fearing that ingratitude will bring more misfortune. Agnes watches every spoonful you take, ready to point out any sign of disapproval. On your face. My late husband never complained about the food, even when we had nothing but roots to eat, she comments, staring at the ceiling. You swallow your response along with the watery soup, knowing that any defense would only prolong the lecture. The sound of spoons scraping the bottom of the bowls is the only sound for long moments, almost comforting in its predictability. Outside, work awaits, relentless as the weather and as demanding as Agnes. You get up, thank her for the meal, and return to the field, where at least the plants don't comment on your failures. The afternoon. Sun beats down on your back as you continue your battle against the soil, against time, and against exhaustion. At times like this, you wonder if the devil isn't sitting in some nearby shadow, laughing at your suffering. Thanks for the recommendation. I'll check the character count of all chapters using the website you mentioned before sending them. I'll continue now with Chapter 2. Who could have imagined that the simple act of returning home would be as fraught with apprehension as facing a hungry bear? The sun begins its descent on the horizon, painting the sky with orange hues that you barely have time to appreciate. Your muscles protest with every step, singing a painful symphony that only you can hear. The hoe weighs on your shoulder as if it were made of lead, not wood and rusty iron. Sweat dries on your skin, leaving a crust of salt and dirt that itches unbearably. Thoughts of the approaching night crawl through your mind like worms in a seemingly healthy apple. Agnes will be there, of course, with her gaze that seems to see every sin you have ever committed or thought of committing. Your feet drag dust on the way back, creating small clouds that dance briefly before settling. The smell of the village reaches you even before the first huts. Wood smoke, animal dung, food being prepared. Children run between the houses, enjoying the last moments of light, their laughter a contrast to the weight of your fatigue. One of them waves at you, and your heart tightens as you think of the children God has not yet granted you. Agnes mentions this often, usually followed by dramatic sighs and accusatory glances at his wife. Fatigue seeps into your bones like moisture into the walls of the hut during winter, persistent and inevitable. The sky is now a tapestry of purple and indigo, with the first stars timidly appearing. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. You pass by the village church and make the sign of the cross, asking for protection against the temptations of the night. Father Joan walks through the churchyard, his face as stern as the gargoyles that adorn the churches of big cities. He waves briefly, his eyes assessing your state, as if he could see the purity of your soul through the dirt on your body. You quicken your pace, feeling the presence of night approaching, that moment when the creatures of darkness gather their courage. Near your hut, you notice strange footprints in the mud, and your heart races like a cornered rabbit. Are they cracked hooves, the mark of the devil, or just the footprints of the neighbor's goat that always escapes from the fence? You murmur a hasty prayer, spitting on the ground and making the sign of the cross again, to be sure. The door to the hut has never looked so inviting, despite what awaits you on the other side. The heat from the fire is the first thing you feel. When you enter, a warm embrace after the cold day that is now turning into a freezing night. Your wife stirs something in the cauldron, her face lit by the dancing fire. A brief moment of beauty in the harshness of the days. Agnes is sitting in the darkest corner, her hands busy with sewing, her eyes fixed on you. The herbs are wilting on the roof, she says without preamble, as if it were your fault for not controlling the weather. The problem presents itself as always. You never do enough. You are never good enough. You are never the man you should be. The consequences hang in the air like the smell of mold. Silent dinners, cutting remarks, constant comparisons with the deceased. Your partial solution is to nod and promise to check the roof tomorrow, knowing that there will be another flaw to point out. Your wife serves dinner in silence. More of the same. Watery stew from lunch, now with a piece of stale bread. Time passes inside the cabin like a prisoner dragging chains. Slow and painfully audible, the darkness outside the wall seems to press against the cracks in the door and windows. eager to come in and swallow the light from the fire. You eat slowly, savoring each spoonful, not for its quality, but for the need to prolong the moment before sleep. Sleep never comes easily, not with Agnes snoring like a choking pig, and the night sounds feeding your fears. Owls hooting seem to convey sinister messages, and every creak of the cabin's wood could be a demon trying to get in. Life slips through the cracks of time like the rain through the holes in the roof that Agnes mentioned, impossible to contain completely. After the meal, you sit by the fire, enjoying its last breaths before it needs to be put out to save wood. Your wife approaches, sitting down beside. You, a rare moment of peace before Agnes finishes her sewing. The heat from the fire makes your eyes heavy, and you fight against sleep, trying to take you before it's time. Stories of nighttime apparitions fill your mind, whispered tales from the tavern, about men who saw the devil in the forest. You rub your eyes, pushing away both sleep and the dark thoughts it brings with it. Agnes finally stands up, putting away her work with excessive care, as if it were a treasure and not just patches on old clothes. My husband always checked the herbs before going to sleep, she says, as she heads to her corner of the hut. You sigh, getting up with effort to check the herbs on the roof, even though you know you won't see anything in the darkness. The night air is as sharp as Agnes' tongue, making you instantly regret coming out. Up above, the stars shine indifferent to your exhaustion, eternal witnesses to the endless cycle of your days. You go back inside, confirming that the herbs will be checked in the morning, receiving only a grunt in response. Sleep finally calls you to your damp straw, an insufficient rest for your exhausted body and tormented mind. Tomorrow will be another day, identical to this one in almost every way, the wheel of life turning endlessly. Your last thought before sleep takes you is a prayer that the devil will stay away from your hut tonight, and that Agnes will wake up in a good mood, even though you know that this is a prayer that not even all the saints together could answer. Are the dreams of a peasant as limited as the horizon he can see from his door? The rooster's crow pierces the thin walls of the hut like a dagger, tearing you from the embrace of sleep. Your eyes open to the same darkness as always, that moment suspended between night and dawn. Your body protests when you try to move, every muscle remembering the previous day's work. Beside you, your wife murmurs something incomprehensible and wraps herself even more tightly in the thin, rough blanket. Your feet find the cold ground, and the routine unfolds like a ball of wool in the hands of a blind craftsman. Outside, the morning mist hangs over the village like unspoken thoughts, dense and mysterious. You walk to the communal well, a wooden bucket swinging in your hand. Creating a monotonous rhythm, the icy water from the well burns your hands like inverted fire, sending sharp pain through your cracked fingers. The first sip is a blessing, washing the bitter taste of the night from your dry mouth. Other villagers approach silently, all performing the same ritual, prisoners of the same daily necessity. Old Thomas nods, his face a map of the same battles you now fight. It will rain before noon, he murmurs, looking up at the sky with the wisdom of decades spent watching the clouds. How can a simple Sunday bring so much relief and yet so much anxiety to a weary soul? The day dawns different from the others, a ray of sunlight piercing the small window like a golden spear. Today is the Lord's day, the only day when tools rest and the fields remain empty. Your eyes open before the rooster crows, years of routine, inscribing time on your body like marks on a tree. The smell of fresh bread fills the hut. Your wife is already awake and has been working since before dawn. For Sunday Mass, even the poorest of peasants try to present themselves clean and dignified before God. You get up quietly, letting your wife sleep a few more precious minutes. The water in the basin is as cold as a tax collector's mercy, but you wash yourself anyway. Your Sunday clothes, carefully stored in a wooden chest, smell of dried herbs and memories of special occasions. The rough fabric scratches your skin, but it is the best you have, reserved only for church and rare weddings. Today, Agnes's words weigh less heavily, her own fear of God keeping her quieter than usual. She emerges from her corner already dressed in her best black outfit, looking like a shadow dressed for a perpetual funeral. Sunday breakfast is almost festive. Bread still warm from the oven and a small piece of cheese. The flavor explodes in her mouth like colors in a stained glass window, intense and rare, almost sinful in its pleasure. Life unfolds on Sunday like a ball of golden thread, precious and different from the rough wool of other days. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. The walk to church is a silent procession, families emerging from huts like ants from their anthills. His boots, reserved for special occasions, still pinch his toes, a constant reminder of the rarity of this comfort. The church bell rings through the valley, its metallic sound cutting through the air like a call that no one dares to ignore. You look at your wife, her face clean and serene, a glimpse of the young woman you fell in love with years ago. Agnes walks ahead, her back straight as a sail, her devotion as unyielding as her opinion of you. The village church stands modest but firm, stones piled up by the faith of past generations. The interior is cool and dark, candles flickering like restless souls, illuminating the saints watching from the altar. The smell of incense mingles with that of rarely washed bodies, creating a unique scent that you associate with devotion. You sit down on the hard wooden bench, feeling your back protest. After 6 days bent over the earth, Father John appears like an apparition. Dressed in simple but clean vestments, his face as stern as that of St. Peter himself, his eyes scan the congregation as if he can see into each soul. Lingering a moment longer on the guilty faces, the Mass is in Latin, words incomprehensible but powerful, washing over you like holy water. You murmur the memorized responses, not understanding the meaning but feeling the weight of tradition in every syllable. The sermon, this time in an understandable language, speaks today of the temptations of the devil and the dangers of laziness. Your eyes grow heavy as the priest describes the horrors of hell awaiting those who give in to temptation. Agnes pokes you in the ribs with a finger as sharp as her tongue, bringing you back to attention. The problem is as clear as spring water, staying alert when your body begs for rest and your mind begs for escape. The consequences hang in the air like incense. Public shame, Agnes's comments, maybe even eternal. Hell, his partial solution, is to fix his eyes on the image of Christ's suffering, reminding himself that his pain is nothing compared to his. His thoughts wander like sheep without a shepherd, returning to his concerns about the fields, the harvest, the winter. The devil works in these moments, whispers the priest, when the mind wanders during sacred services. You sit up straight in the pew, trying to ward off sleep and worldly thoughts, like someone swatting away persistent flies. Around you, other peasants fight the same battle, some visibly losing as their chins touch their chests. Communion arrives as a relief, the slow line advancing to receive the body of Christ in the form of a dry wafer. The taste is nothing and everything at the same time, dissolving on your tongue like snow in the sun, leaving only faith. Back in your pew, you observe the rest of the congregation, noticing their patched but clean clothes and solemn faces. The end of Mass is announced, and the congregation moves, like a single organism toward the church square. Sunday is also a day for socializing, exchanging news and gossip, observing and being observed. You notice the looks at your wife, at her waist that does not yet carry the weight of a child. Agnes notices too, her face wrinkling even more as she talks to other women of similar age. The problem now is another, escaping the sharp tongues and questioning glances without appearing rude or antisocial. The consequences of failing are well known. Rumors whispers, perhaps even suspicion of demonic intervention in the absence of children. A partial solution comes in the form of old Thomas, who approaches to discuss the weather and the prospects for the harvest. Talking about the weather is safe, neutral ground where everyone can express their opinion without fear of offending God or their neighbors. Thomas predicts a hot summer, his aching leg serving as a more reliable barometer than any sign in the sky. The sun is now high, warming the stone square and the bodies moving across it like pieces on a divine chessboard. His wife finally manages to extricate herself from a conversation. Approaching him with eyes that beg for rescue, Agnes remains with her circle of widows. All dressed in black, like a flock of crows discussing the carcasses of the living, you slip away discreetly, waving to acquaintances as you walk away toward the hut and Sunday lunch. The way back seems lighter, as if the Mass had actually lifted some of the weight of your sins. Sunday is also the only day you eat meat, usually a small piece saved during the week. The aroma coming from the hut makes your stomach growl like a caged animal, eager for the rarity of a satisfying meal. Inside, the fire your wife kept going before Mass still burns, warming a stew that bubbles with promises to the taste buds. Agnes will be back soon, but for a few precious moments, the cabin is just the two of you, a temporary sanctuary. Your wife smiles, momentarily free from her mother's critical gaze, and her smile lights up the cabin more than any candle. You embrace her briefly, feeling the warmth of her body like an everyday miracle that even Agnes cannot diminish. Sunday flows like honey from a beehive, slow and sweet, a contrast to the vinegar of the other 6 days. For today, the devil seems to be keeping his distance, perhaps too busy with more interesting souls or simply respecting the holy day. You allow yourself to relax for a few hours, knowing that tomorrow the cycle will begin again, as inexorable as the tides or the seasons. Have you ever stopped to think how a simple encounter in a tavern can be the only paradise accessible to an ordinary man? Monday arrives heavy as a millstone, dragging you back to the reality of incessant work. The field awaits you, relentless in its demands, indifferent to the brief rest your body enjoyed on Sunday. The morning light reveals Agnes, already awake and grumbling about the bread that didn't rise as it should have. You leave early today, avoiding the poison of her words, preferring the cold embrace of the dew in the fields. Your back aches as you bend over the young plants, checking for damage after the recent rain. Some shoots have been destroyed, small green corpses that represent future hunger with each loss. You work methodically, row after row, like a scribe patiently copying a sacred text onto the earth. The sun rises in the sky, warming your skin as your thoughts wander to the night ahead. Today is Tavern Day, the only time of the week when you truly escape Agnes's clutches. Excitement boils in your blood like beer in a new barrel, bubbling beneath the surface of your routine. Each swing of the hoe is a step closer to those few hours of freedom you cherish so much. The field seems endless today, stretching out like an earthly purgatory you must cross to reach your reward. Other peasants wave from afar, all silently sharing the same secret. Monday night is sacred. The women stay at home, Agnes among them, while the men discuss village matters in the safety of the tavern. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Time crawls like a wounded man, each hour an eternity of sweat and effort under the merciless sun. When twilight finally tinges the sky, you gather your tools with renewed energy. The walk home is lighter, despite the fatigue weighing on your muscles. Agnes greets you with her usual sharp gaze, already knowing that tonight you will not be under her control. The tavern again? She asks, even though she already knows the answer that repeats itself every week. The problem now is different. How to escape quickly without looking too anxious, without provoking more acid comments. The consequences of staying are as clear as spring water. More criticism, more comparisons with her late perfect husband. The partial solution comes in the form of a quick meal that you swallow without really tasting it, anxious for what is to come. Your wife discreetly hands you a small bag of coins, savings set aside for this weekly moment. It's not much, just enough for a few mugs of beer, but it represents much more than its value in copper. You get up, mumble an excuse about discussing the mill repair with the other men, and leave before Agnes can respond. The night air is like wine to your lungs after the confinement of the cabin, refreshing and full of possibilities. The tavern is nothing more than a large cabin with rustic benches, but to you it is a castle of simple pleasures. Yellow light escapes through the small windows, dancing in the darkness like whispered invitations. To enter, the smell reaches you before you even open the door. Fermented beer, men's sweat, wood smoke. Inside, the heat of crowded bodies creates a dense atmosphere that envelops you like a blanket of camaraderie. Familiar faces wave, some already flushed from drink, others just beginning to relax after the day's work. You find a place on the bench next to old Thomas, who is already in the middle of a story about his youth. The first mug of beer is placed in your hands, the foam overflowing slightly from the sides of the wooden cup. The taste is bitter and sweet at the same time, sliding down your throat like liquid freedom itself. The tavern keeper, a man with arms as thick as tree trunks, keeps the mugs full and the spirits in check. Conversations flow around you like a rushing river. Stories of harvests, rumors from the nearby town, old jokes. No one mentions the devil here, as if there were a tacit agreement that he is not welcome in this sanctuary. You feel your muscles gradually relax, the weight of the day slipping from your shoulders like water from a roof. The second mug goes down easier than the first, warming your stomach and slightly blurring the edges of the world. Thomas now talks about signs in the sky that predict a harsh winter, his deep voice carrying the wisdom of the years. Others join the conversation, each with their own prediction, each theory more elaborate than the last. No one really knows, but there is comfort in this exchange, in this illusion of control over forces beyond their reach. The tavern serves as a secular confessional, where minor sins are admitted amid laughter and slaps on the back. My wife thinks I spent the day fixing the fence, confesses one, provoking a knowing laughter. You smile, thinking of Agnes and her unshakable belief in the non-existent repair of the mill you are discussing. Guilt brushes lightly against your conscience like a cat passing between your legs, but it is easily swept away by the third mug. The usual problem arises: how to make the most of this freedom without compromising tomorrow's work. The consequences of overdoing it are painfully familiar. A throbbing head at dawn, work twice as hard. The partial solution is the rhythm he has learned from experience, spacing out the mugs, eating the stale bread offered by the tavern keeper. The hours pass like thieves in the night, stealthy and quick, stealing the treasure of his free time. Stories are exchanged like coins, some worn from overuse, others shiny in their novelty. You contribute with an account of the strange shape of the clouds you saw today, swearing that they looked like horseshoes. A murmur runs through the table, some making the sign of the cross, others nodding with somber knowledge. Horses in the sky mean war or famine, declares an old man in the corner, his white beard trembling with certainty. The tavern suddenly grows quieter, as if his words have opened a door to collective fears you regret mentioning. The clouds, feeling the weight of superstition, fall over the group like a shadow. The tavern keeper breaks the spell by bringing more beer, his loud voice dispersing the dark thoughts like wind blowing through dry leaves. The conversations resume, now about the blacksmith's daughter, who is said to have her eye on the miller's son. Gossip is the bread and butter of these gatherings, feeding the hunger for excitement in such mundane lives. You find yourself thinking about your own wife, How Agnes constantly reminds you of the absence of children in your home. The guilt returns, more insistent now, reminding you that you should be at home, by her side, not here. But the warmth of the tavern keeps you trapped, like an insect in amber, suspended in this moment of false freedom. The night progresses, and slowly the men begin to disperse, some staggering, others just tired. You say goodbye, paying your debts with carefully counted coins, saving some for next week. The cool night. Air hits your face like a slap, bringing some sobriety back to your thoughts. The way home seems different in the dark, longer and full of shadows moving in the corners of your eyes. You murmur a prayer, half a plea for protection, half a plea for forgiveness for the small sin of lying. The hut comes into view, a darker spot against the starry sky, silent and seemingly asleep. You enter carefully, trying not to make a sound, but the door creaks as always, announcing your arrival. Your wife pretends to be asleep, but you notice her irregular breathing, betraying her waking consciousness. Agnes, on the other hand, snores openly, her contempt for you manifesting itself even in her sleep. You lie down, feeling the world spin slightly, the beer still singing in your veins like a pagan prayer. Tomorrow will be the same as today, and the day after tomorrow the same as tomorrow. An eternal cycle of work and brief escapes. But for now, you allow yourself to sink into sleep, carrying the echoes of laughter and stories from the tavern into your dreams. What happens when nature decides to test the endurance of a man already bent by the weight of life? The first signs of the approaching storm are so subtle that only the elders recognize them. You notice a restlessness among the village animals, chickens fluttering about, and dogs howling at nothing. Old Thomas watches the horizon with narrowed eyes, his wrinkled face more serious than usual. Something big is coming, he murmurs as you pass by, his tone carrying the weight of decades spent watching the sky. You raise your eyes to the clouds gathering in the distance, dark as Agnes's mood on her worst days. The air has a strange quality, heavy and electrified at the same time, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. The plants in the fields seem to shrink, curling in anticipation of what is to come. Your head still aches slightly from the beer the night before, a throbbing reminder of your brief escape. The hull feels heavier today, as if the metal has absorbed the growing density of the air around. You work with greater urgency, feeling time closing in, literally and figuratively, on your weary shoulders. The earth seems to resist your efforts with greater determination, as if it knows something you do not yet know. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the strangely cool air, each drop a sacrifice to some unknown god. Other peasants also work with unusual speed, all aware of the threat looming on the horizon like an omen. The sky gradually darkens, as if an invisible hand were lowering a curtain over the world. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. The first clap of thunder echoes in the distance, a roar that seems to come from the depths of the earth rather than the sky. You straighten up, your back protesting, and contemplate the dilemma that every peasant faces. Continue or seek shelter? Staying means taking a risk, but leaving early means less work done, less food on the table, more criticism from Agnes. A heavy drop of rain hits your face, cold as the touch of death, deciding the matter for you. You gather your tools in a hurry, seeing others do the same, a stampede of ants before the flood. The problem quickly materializes. The storm is no ordinary one, its size and fury promising destruction. The consequences hang over the village like black clouds, damaged crops, destroyed roofs, possible starvation. The partial solution lies in the speed of your steps toward the hut, in the precarious protection it offers. The rain gains strength as you run, turning from isolated drops into a curtain of water that obscures your vision. The path turns to mud under your feet, each step a battle against the suction of the wet earth. Lightning cuts through the sky like cracks in a clay pot, followed by thunder that you feel in your chest like a second heartbeat. The hut comes into view, never looking as fragile as it does now, facing the fury of the elements with only straw and wood. You enter breathless, soaked to the bone, to find Agnes and his wife reinforcing the windows with rags. The roof is already leaking in 3 places, Agnes informs you without looking at you, his voice competing with the roar of the storm. Buckets and pots are already strategically positioned to collect the water seeping through the gaps in the roof. You immediately take on the most dangerous job, climbing onto a stool to reach the highest points of the roof. The wet straw gives way under your fingers like shattered hopes, revealing holes larger than they initially appeared. Your wife works silently beside you, passing you dry rags and pieces of straw reserved for emergencies. Agnes continues to recite all the storms she has ever seen, each one seemingly worse than the current one. Each one survived thanks to her wisdom. The wind howls through the cracks like tormented souls, bringing with it the bitter cold of the storm. The entire cabin seems to shake under the impact of the rain, like a cornered animal facing a larger predator. Your hands work mechanically, shoving straw into holes, pressing rags against the most persistent leaks. Each new leak is a battle, and you move from one to the next like a soldier in a lost war. Outside, the storm roars like a mythological monster determined to dismantle every human work in its path. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Agnes declares, with a grim certainty that you hate to admit is probably correct. Time inside. The cabin is distorted, stretched by urgency and compressed by constant activity. Hours pass in a blur of water, wind, and frantic work to keep the dwelling intact. When night falls, it's almost imperceptible, the darkness of the storm only deepening into something more absolute. The only source of light is the small candle protected by a glass container, its flame flickering like your resolve. The roar of the storm is punctuated by alarming sounds, branches breaking, unidentified objects being dragged by the wind. You imagine your field, the young plants being uprooted by the force of the water. Weeks of work destroyed in hours. Your wife finally places a bowl of soup in your hands, the heat of the liquid a shocking contrast to the cold of the storm. The taste barely registers on your exhausted tongue, but the warmth revives something. Inside you, a core of resistance. Agnes prays softly in her corner, her words incomprehensible, but the tone unmistakably one of supplication. You silently join the prayer, not out of faith but out of desperation, seeking any protection available. The night wears on, and the storm seems to gather strength, as if warming up for the main attack. The problem now is to survive the night, keep the hut in one piece, prevent the water from turning the floor into a swamp. The consequences of failure are too clear to contemplate. Exposure to the elements, disease, possibly worse. The partial solution is to work in shifts, allowing brief moments of rest while the others keep watch. You sit down briefly, your back against the most solid wall, watching your wife fight a new leak. Her face, illuminated by the dim candlelight, shows a determination you rarely notice in everyday life. Agnes also reveals a surprising strength, her wrinkled hands moving with precision and purpose that belie her age. In these moments, you understand why she has survived so long, why even the perfect husband needed her strength. A particularly violent crash shakes the hut, freezing the 3 of you in place like prey spotting a predator. The silence that follows is more frightening than the noise. Everyone waiting for the roof to collapse on their heads. When nothing happens, you exhale the breath you didn't even realize you were holding, exchanging relieved glances with your wife. Even Agnes seems momentarily vulnerable, her rosary clenched. Between white fingers tense with tension, the storm continues its assault, seemingly tireless, testing every joint, every patch, every weakness, You take turns at the most problematic spots, plugging one hole only to find another, forming a few. Steps away, the water on the floor reaches your ankles in some places. The earth turned to mud that dirties everything it touches. Your clothes are damp, not from the rain, but from the sweat of constant effort, sticking to your skin like an uncomfortable second layer. The hours crawl by like snails, each minute an eternity of tense vigilance and uninterrupted work. When the roar of the storm finally begins to subside, replaced by a more constant and less violent rain, the relief is palpable. Agnes is the first to speak, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and prayer. We survived the worst. Now we just have to wait for dawn. Her words carry the weight of experience, and for the first time, you feel something close to sympathy for your relentless mother-in-law. The problem now shifts from immediate survival to damage assessment, reconstruction, and starting over. The consequences of the storm will linger for weeks, perhaps months, in delayed harvests and necessary repairs. The partial solution is to accept what cannot be changed, rest what you can, and prepare for the work ahead. You allow yourself to slide to the floor, your back against the wall, your legs stretched out in the mud, too tired to care. Your wife settles down beside you, her body a welcome source of warmth in the damp cold of the devastated cabin. Even Agnes joins them silently, forming an unlikely trio united by their shared battle against the elements. Sleep comes in waves, like the storm itself, pulling him down despite the discomforts and worries. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for now, survival is victory enough against a world determined to test him. The rain continues to fall, now a steady lullaby instead of the furious roar of before. And in the dark, waiting for dawn, three people breathe in unison, temporarily united by the oldest of enemies, nature. Who could have imagined that the light of dawn would reveal a world so transformed by the fury of a single night? The sun rises reluctantly from behind scattered clouds, its weak rays illuminating the destruction left behind by the storm. You wake up with pain in every joint, as if you had aged decades during your restless sleep. The dirt floor of the cabin has turned into a mushy surface that sticks to your feet like guilt to your conscience. Your wife is already on her feet, trying to salvage what she can of the few belongings soaked by the rainwater. Agnes stares at the damaged roof, her face a mask of resignation, hardened by years of similar disasters. We need to check the fields, she says simply, verbalizing. The thought that weighs on her stomach like a stone, you struggle to your feet, your muscles protesting every movement after your battle with the storm. The air inside the hut is saturated with moisture, each breath like a sip of water that doesn't quench your thirst. Outside, the village looks as if it has been trampled by invisible giants, every structure showing some sign of the night's violence. Roofs are partially torn off, fences are knocked down, and disoriented chickens wander aimlessly through the muddy paths. Other villagers emerge from their huts like survivors of a battle, their dazed eyes assessing the damage. The path to your field has never seemed so long, each step in the mud sucking not only your boots but also your hopes. The devastation gradually reveals itself as a nightmare that refuses to end with the awakening. Young plants lie sprawled in the mud, torn up by the force of the water or bent at impossible angles by the wind. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. You kneel on the soggy ground, trembling hands trying to straighten a wheat sprout that stubbornly resists death. Weeks of work diluted like salt in hot water, dissolved by the storm in a single merciless night. Your wife stands silently beside you, eyes scanning the extent of the damage, mentally calculating what can be saved. Agnes surprisingly offers no cutting comments, her silence more eloquent than any verbal reproach. The sun now shines more strongly, evaporating the moisture from the surface and creating a ghostly mist over the fields. The problem presents itself in all its brutal entirety. Possible starvation, double the work, already scarce resources, now even more limited. The consequences extend beyond the visible, probable illnesses from the constant humidity, debts to the feudal lord who will not forgive delays. A partial solution emerges in the form of an immediate plan. Save what you can today, replan tomorrow, survive forever. You begin to work methodically, straightening plants, removing debris brought in by the water, draining deeper puddles. Your hands sink into the cold mud as if searching for something lost. Security, certainty, a less precarious future. The work is harder than usual, every movement fighting against the suction of the soggy earth that seems to want to swallow you. Other peasants work in their own fields, all united in the same desperate struggle against time and nature. The sun rises higher, beginning to dry their clothes still damp from the night before, creating an itchy discomfort on their skin. Hours pass in a blur of continuous effort, their already exhausted muscles protesting with every new movement. Agnes and his wife work alongside him, three figures bent over the earth like penitents seeking redemption. Your stomach protests with audible growls, reminding you that none of you have eaten anything since the thin soup of the night before. "I'll go get something to eat," your wife finally says, straightening her back with an audible crack of tired joints. You nod, grateful for the break, watching her walk away down the muddy path toward the hut. Agnes continues to work without pause, her wrinkled hands moving with the efficiency of decades of toil on the land. "I saw worse in the winter when you were still breastfeeding," she comments, without looking up, surprising you with her almost kindness. You wait for the usual criticism that always follows any apparent kindness, but she just continues to work in silence. Disaster has this strange power to level differences, to create temporary alliances against a common enemy. Your wife returns with a small bundle, miraculously dry bread, and a few pieces of hard cheese saved from the flood. You eat sitting on fallen logs in silence, each lost in thoughts about the work ahead. The food, though simple, invigorates your body like fresh water on parched land, restoring some of your lost strength. The mill was damaged, your wife informs you between bites. They say it will take weeks to repair. This news falls like another stone into the already deep well of your worries. Without a mill, there is no flour. Without flour, there is no bread. Agnes sighs deeply, her gaze distant as if she were seeing beyond the current disaster, perhaps, remembering other difficult times. "We survived before, we'll survive now," she says simply, getting up to resume her work without further comment. You exchange a surprised glance with your wife, this brief moment of solidarity from Agnes as unexpected as the storm itself. The afternoon wears on, the sun beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the partially recovered field. Your fingers are wrinkled and sore from constant exposure to the wet earth. Your nails broken and your skin scraped in several places. Your back aches, as if someone had repeatedly struck each vertebra with a stick, a constant reminder of your fragility. Exhaustion weighs on your eyelids like molten lead trying to close. Them, despite the need to keep working. "That's enough for today," Agnes finally declares, her authority rarely challenged even by you. You can't fight the night. The return to the hut is a silent procession of exhausted bodies, each step an exercise in sheer willpower. The sight of the damaged hut does not bring the usual comfort, only reminding you that the work does not end with the field. Inside, the persistent humidity creates a suffocating atmosphere, the smell of mold already beginning to settle in the straw mattress. Your wife rekindles the fire with difficulty, the damp wood protesting with crackles and excessive smoke that stings your eyes. Dinner is a repeat of lunch, bread, cheese, now accompanied by a few herbs salvaged from the roof to add some flavor. Agnes surprisingly does not mention her late husband once during the meal, a small miracle amid the disaster. You look at the roof, identifying the spots that will need immediate repair before another rain, even a lighter one, causes more damage. Tomorrow, you say, answering the unspoken question in your wife's eyes. Tomorrow we'll fix the roof first. Agnes nods, silently approving your plan, another small miracle you attribute to the extreme exhaustion she must be feeling. Sleep calls like an irresistible siren, even though you know the damp mattress will bring more discomfort than true rest. You lie down anyway, your body protesting against the cold dampness that seems to penetrate your bones. Your wife settles down beside you, her warmth the only truly comforting thing on this day of loss and hard work. Agnes mumbles her nighttime prayers, the familiarity of the routine bringing a strange comfort amid the chaos. Your thoughts drift like leaves in the current, passing through worries about the field, the roof, the winter to come. Exhaustion finally wins the battle against anxiety, dragging him into a deep, dreamless sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, but for today, you have survived, adapted, endured as farmers have done for generations. Life continues its winding course like a river after a storm, altered but persistent, finding new paths when the old ones are blocked. And in the darkness of the damaged hut, 3 people sleep the sleep of the truly exhausted, temporarily united by their common struggle. Confirm 7 complete chapters, 6,000 words so far. Have you ever noticed how dawn always has that annoying quality of hope, even when you know the day will be just another battle? The first rays of sunlight enter through the cracks in the damaged roof like meddlesome fingers, waking you from a deep sleep. Your body feels like stone, every muscle protesting at the slightest movement, a reminder of yesterday's superhuman effort. The smell of damp lingers in the cabin like an unwelcome visitor who refuses to leave. Agnes is already awake, of course, poking at the weak fire as if she could intimidate it into burning better with her stern gaze. Your wife still sleeps. Beside you, her face relaxed in sleep, revealing the youth that hard work hides during the day. You get up quietly, feeling every joint crack like dry twigs under heavy boots. The floor is still damp under your feet, the earth slowly absorbing the water like a reluctant drunk sipping the last drop. Outside, the sky is clear, almost mocking the destruction its clouds caused just 2 days ago. Agnes glances at you briefly, then points to a bowl of thin porridge, her version of good morning, the roof. First, she says, echoing the decision made the night before. There's no point in planting if we have nowhere to dry the seeds. You nod, swallowing the porridge without really tasting it, your mind already calculating the materials needed for the repairs. Others in the village will be doing the same, all competing for the same limited resources. Dry straw, wood, available. Hands to help. Your wife wakes up and joins the silent meal, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but determination visible in her posture. The problem of the day is clear. Repair the roof with scarce materials while the entire village tries to do the same. The consequences of failure are too obvious to ignore. More damage in the next rain. Disease from constant dampness. Loss of stored food. The partial solution is to start early, use creativity where materials are lacking, and perhaps count on the solidarity of the community. You go out to assess the damage in the light of day, noting that 3 sections of the roof will need to be completely rebuilt. Other huts in the village show similar or worse damage, some with walls partially blown down by the strong wind. The sun shines mercilessly, as if to make up for its absence during the storm, with redoubled intensity now. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. You walk to the communal warehouse where you keep some tools and materials for emergencies like this. Other villagers converge on the same spot, their faces showing variations of the same exhaustion and concern you feel. Old Thomas is organizing the distribution, his experience in previous disasters making him a natural leader in these moments. Each family will receive enough straw for a third of their roof, he announces, his eyes tired but his voice firm. We'll have to improvise with the rest. You receive your share, aware that it won't be enough, but grateful for the organized system amid the chaos. Back at the hut, you find your wife and Agnes already sorting through the materials saved from the storm that can be reused. The silent solidarity between the two women is a rare phenomenon, like an eclipse that you watch cautiously, fearing its brevity. We'll need more straw, you say, putting down the bundle you received. This barely covers the section over the stove. Agnes surprisingly offers no criticism, just a practical nod before suggesting the old mats can be shredded. It's a good idea, turning the reed mats used in winter into material to reinforce the sparse straw on the roof. You climb the small makeshift ladder, beginning to remove the damaged sections, while your wife passes you the materials. The sun beats down on your back as you work, sweat running in salty rivulets that sting the cuts and scrapes on your arms. Your fingers quickly become raw from handling the rough straw and tying it tightly to the roof beams. Agnes works below, preparing the bundles and offering occasional advice that, surprisingly, is actually helpful. The morning passes in a blur of concentrated effort, every movement precise and necessary, with no energy to waste. Neighbors pass by occasionally, some offering to help for a few hours, others just sharing news of other damage. The blacksmith has lost part of his forge, a disaster that will affect the entire village when tools need to be repaired. The well has overflowed, contaminating the water with mud and debris, another problem that will require collective work to solve. You work mechanically, your mind wandering between immediate concerns and calculations about how to stretch your limited resources. Time slips through your fingers like sand in a broken hourglass, too fast for all that needs to be done. By noon, half the roof is repaired, a small but significant triumph that the three of you contemplate during a brief break. The bread for lunch is running out, another reminder of the many cascading consequences the storm has unleashed. The miller said he'll be able to fix the blades in a week if the weather stays dry, a passing neighbor informs you. A week without. Fresh flour means rationing even more, stretching every crumb as if it were gold, turning necessity into virtue. You return to work with renewed urgency. Each straw tile placed a small victory against an uncertain future. Your wife works alongside you now, the two of you moving in a synchronized dance born of years of sharing the same space. Agnes remains below, her hawk eyes detecting any flaws or weaknesses in the pattern of coverage they are creating. The afternoon progresses, the sun beginning its descent, casting shadows that stretch like worries over the field yet to be reclaimed. Your muscles tremble with exhaustion, each movement now an act of pure willpower against gravity and fatigue. Finally, with the sun almost touching the horizon, the last section of the roof is completed. Imperfect but functional, you climb down the ladder with wobbly legs, contemplating the work with the exhausted satisfaction of someone who has won a battle, but not the war. It'll hold until we get more straw, Agnes declares, the closest thing to a compliment you've ever received from her. Your wife smiles slightly, a brief ray of light in dark days as she wipes her hands on her already dirty skirts. Inside the hut, the floor is still damp, but the feeling of accomplishment temporarily outweighs the lingering discomfort. Dinner is meager, the last of the bread, a few roots salvaged from the flooded garden, herbal tea to warm, tired bones. You eat in a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after shared work and goals achieved together. Tiredness hangs over the table like mist over a morning lake, enveloping every thought in a fog of exhaustion. Tomorrow, the fields, you say finally, knowing that this brief moment of cooperation with Agnes may not survive the dawn. She nods, her eyes already closing involuntarily, age and effort finally overcoming her iron determination. Your wife rests her head on your shoulder as you sit, close to the weak fire, a rare gesture of public intimacy. The warmth between you is more comforting than the flame, a reminder that not even storms can destroy everything. Sleep comes quickly tonight, heavy and deep like the ground itself after the rain, saturated with exhaustion. Before succumbing completely, you look at the repaired cabin, imperfect but whole, like the life you lead. Tomorrow will bring the challenge of flooded fields, destroyed, plants, seeds lost to the merciless water. But tonight, under a roof repaired by familiar hands, you allow sleep to take away your worries, at least temporarily. The moon rises in the clear sky, indifferent to human dramas below. Its unperturbed cycle, a reminder of the world's persistence, and in the small restored hut, three people breathe the deep rhythm of true rest, united by shared work and a common struggle. Have you ever wondered how a devastated field looks like a shattered dream, each fallen plant a hope that refuses to die completely? Dawn brings with it the hesitant song of birds that seem as confused as you are by the sudden change in the landscape. Your muscles still protest from the work on the roof, but today a new battle awaits you in the soggy fields. Breakfast is silent, each of you saving words as if they were as scarce as the bread you share. Agnes surprisingly remains in her cooperative mood, packing small bundles of food for the long day ahead. The sun promises intense heat, an unexpected ally that will help dry the soggy earth more quickly. The three of you walk together to the field, a small army temporarily united against a common enemy, destruction. The path still shows the scars of the storm, stubborn puddles reflecting the sky like broken mirrors scattered across the ground. The sight of the field in the clear morning light is even more discouraging than the day before. Bent plants form chaotic patterns, as if a giant child had dragged its fingers across the soft earth. Puddles of standing water reflect the sky in dozens of small eyes that seem to watch your approach with liquid indifference. Time has melted like wax under intense heat, dripping from the corners of reality and transforming everything in its path. You mentally divide the field into sections, assigning priorities like a general planning a decisive battle. The least affected areas first, saving what can be saved. Immediately before the harsh sun causes further damage, your hands sink into the cold mud, straightening plants, removing debris, rebuilding small ditches to drain the stagnant water. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Agnes works with surprising vigor for her age, attacking the task with the same intensity she normally reserves for her criticism. Her wife moves methodically across the field, each plant receiving individual attention like wounded children in need of care. The sun rises in the sky, evaporating surface, moisture, and transforming the air into something almost tangible, heavy with heat and promise. Other farmers work in neighboring fields, all hunched over the earth like penitents seeking absolution for some collective sin. The problem unfolds in layers. Like an onion being peeled, save what can be saved, replan what has been lost, prepare for an uncertain future. The consequences of failure loom like long shadows over their minds. Hunger in winter, unpayable debts, disease born of weakness. The partial solution lies in the constant movement of their hands, in the knowledge passed down through generations, in the stubbornness that refuses to accept defeat. The sun reaches its peak, punishing their backs with merciless rays that burn through their sweat-soaked shirts. You straighten up for a moment, stretching your aching back, observing the slow but steady progress you have made since dawn. A third of the field shows signs of recovery, straightened plants drinking greedily of the sun after days of excess water. Agnes surprisingly suggests a break, pointing to the lone shadow of a tree at the edge of the field. The momentary relief from the sun is like diving into cool water after days in the desert, every nerve in your skin singing in gratitude. The breakfast you brought from home has never tasted so intense, hunger transforming the simple into the sublime like reverse alchemy. I saw a spring like this once, Agnes comments, her eyes distant, recalling times you weren't even alive to witness. We lost half the harvest, but what was left grew strong like oak trees, as if trying to prove something to the sky. His words carry a strange comfort, reminding you that the earth has its own cycles of destruction and renewal. Your wife rests her head on your shoulder briefly, a simple gesture that carries the weight of unspoken hopes. The moment of rest ends quickly, work calling you back like an impatient master. The afternoon brings a new challenge. The intense heat begins to harden the surface mud while the ground below remains waterlogged. The earth turns into a brittle crust over treacherous mud. Each step a risk of sinking ankle deep. Your tools cut into the surface with increasing difficulty, as if the earth itself were resisting your efforts to heal it. Sweat streams down your face in steady rivulets, stinging your eyes and leaving salty trails that itch unbearably. You work mechanically now, your mind detached from your body, each movement dictated by necessity rather than conscious thought. Agnes finally shows signs of fatigue, her movements slower, her pauses more frequent, her breathing more labored. Your wife exchanges worried glances with you, both of you knowing that your mother-in-law will never willingly admit weakness. Agnes, can you check if there are any seeds left in the barn? You suggest, offering an exit that preserves her pride. She hesitates, clearly torn between the desire to continue and the recognition of her physical limits. The seeds are the priority, she finally agrees, straightening her shoulders as, if receiving a crucial mission. Her departure brings guilty relief, allowing you and your wife to slow the frantic pace slightly. She'll never change, your wife comments with a small smile, the first lightness in days of constant worry. You nod, returning to work with more calculated movements, conserving energy for the hours that remain. The sun begins its descent, transforming the sky into a palette of colors that seems out of place over the wounded earth. Your arms weigh like lead, each lift of the hoe a test of willpower against growing exhaustion. Other peasants begin to return to their huts, silhouettes bent against the horizon like symbols of human resilience. The field now shows clear signs of intervention. Straighter lines, straightened plants, water directed into makeshift ditches. You contemplate the day's work with the resigned satisfaction of someone who knows they have done their best within the limitations imposed. Tomorrow we'll finish the rest, you decide, noticing the obvious fatigue on your wife's face. The walk back to the hut is silent, feet dragging on. The earth that is gradually drying under the persistent heat. Agnes is waiting for you at the door, her face an unreadable mask that reveals nothing about whether she found the seeds or not. We have enough to replant a quarter of the field, she informs you without preamble as you approach. The news is both a relief and a concern. Better than nothing, but far from ideal for ensuring enough food. Inside the hut, the floor is noticeably drier, the repaired roof fulfilling its function despite its imperfection. The aroma of root soup fills the confined space, another small miracle. Organized by Agnes during your absence. You wash yourself in the basin of cold water, watching the dirt dissolve from your skin like days being washed from your memory. Dinner is eaten in respectful silence. 3 people united by shared work and common concerns. Agnes finally breaks the silence with surprising words. You worked well today. He would have approved. The oblique compliment, still referencing her late husband, but including you in the approval, is as unexpected as it is welcome. His wife almost chokes on her soup, her eyes widening to meet yours in shared shock. Thank you, you reply simply, fearing that any elaboration might break this fragile moment of peace. Tiredness falls over the cabin like night fog, enveloping every thought in cotton and making your eyelids heavy. The night brings the sound of crickets and frogs, prosperous survivors of the recent flood, their song a reminder of the persistence of life. You lie down on the now almost dry mattress, your aching body welcoming the rest like parched earth welcomes the first rain. Beside you, your wife is already breathing deeply, pulled from consciousness by complete exhaustion. Agnes mumbles her nightly prayers, the familiar routine bringing comfort on days when everything else seems uncertain. Your thoughts wander briefly before sleep, calculating seeds, imagining harvests, planning for contingencies. Life unfolds like a ball of rough wool, each day a thread being pulled from chaos to create something recognizable. Sleep finally overtakes him, deep and restful, as only it can be after honest physical labor and clear purpose. And so the day ends as it began, with the field partially recovered, waiting for more work, more care, more hope. The moon watches indifferently from its celestial throne, silently witnessing the eternal struggle of humans against forces much greater than themselves. Why do moments of peace always seem so fragile, like soap bubbles that float briefly before bursting at the slightest touch? The days after the storm establish a new rhythm, different from the previous routine, but with its own predictable cadence. You wake up with the first rays of sun, your body still sore, but each day a little less than the last. The smell of mold gradually diminishes in the cabin, replaced by the familiar aroma of fire, dried herbs, and human life. Agnes maintains a silent truce, her criticism less frequent and more directed at situations than people. Your wife blossoms in this new environment, her smile more frequent than flowers appearing after heavy rain. The fields begin to show signs of recovery, surviving plants stretching toward the sun with vegetal determination. The remaining seeds have been carefully planted, each one as precious as gold in a world where food is the true currency. Each morning you inspect the new plantings, eagerly watching for any sign of sprouts emerging from the soil. The work is as constant as the seasons, but the shared purpose brings a satisfaction you have rarely experienced before. The entire village moves in sync, everyone rebuilding, repairing, replanting, with the urgency of those who know winter. The miller works day and night to repair the mill blades, aware that without flour the community will face certain starvation. The sky remains clear day after day, as if apologizing for its previous fury with a generosity of sunshine. Life flows through the days like water through stream stones, finding new paths when the old ones are blocked. On this particular morning, you notice the first green sprout timidly emerging from the earth, where they replanted after the destruction. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. You kneel down to take a closer look at this small, ordinary miracle that still seems so significant. Your fingers gently touch the tiny leaf, connecting with this fragile promise of future nourishment and survival. The sun warms your back as you continue your daily work, each movement now carrying a little more hope. Agnes appears at noon, bringing fresh water and bread, her face less stern under the straw hat that protects her from the sun. The sprouts are coming up, you comment, seeking to share the small joy of this morning discovery. She nods, her eyes scanning the field with the critical eye of someone who has seen many harvests come and go. It's a start, she concedes. Simple words that carry more approval than long speeches could. The problem of incomplete recovery remains a shadow over every small victory, reminding you that the danger has not passed. The consequences of the reduced harvest loom large for the future. Less food stored, a harder winter, less room for error. The partial solution comes in the form of adaptation, new planting techniques, maximum use of space, crop diversification. You drink the water offered, feeling the cool liquid go down your dry throat like a liquid blessing. The bread, though rationed into thinner slices than usual, still brings comfort with its familiar taste and comforting texture. The priest is organizing special prayers for the harvest, Agnes informs you between carefully measured bites. You nod, knowing that divine help will be welcome alongside the earthly work that fills your days. The sun reaches its peak, intense heat creating visible ripples in the air above the still, partially damp field. Your wife works at the opposite end of the field, her figure bent against the horizon like an unanswered question. Sweat streams down your face in steady rivulets, mixing with dust to create an earthy mask on your skin. Agnes returns to the hut after her brief break, her household chores as essential as her work in the field. The afternoon drags on like a wounded animal, each hour a struggle against the heat and the accumulated fatigue of the previous days. Old Thomas appears at the edge of the field, his thin body casting a shadow as long and thin as his own existence. The feudal lord is sending a messenger. Tomorrow, he informs you without preamble, the news weighing in the air like lead. Your stomach tightens with immediate concern. Messengers usually mean more taxes or forced labor on the manor lands. Why? You ask, knowing that the answer will likely bring no comfort, only confirmation of your fears. To assess the damage, they say, Thomas replies, shrugging his bony shoulders. To decide who can pay how much after that. The problem now takes on a new dimension. How to demonstrate enough damage to receive leniency without appearing completely ruined? The consequences hang like a sword over your head. Payments too high mean certain starvation. Too low raise suspicion. The partial solution is uncertain, perhaps presenting the field exactly as it is, trusting in the dubious justice of the distant lord. Thomas departs with a nod, spreading the same disturbing news across the neighboring fields like a sour of worry. You continue working, each movement now carrying the additional weight of the impending visit and its possible repercussions. The sun begins its descent, lengthening the shadows and softening the light that bathes the field in deceptively serene golden tones. Your wife approaches, fatigue visible in every line of her body, but determination still shining in her eyes. Thomas told me about the messenger. She says, not a question, but a statement of shared fact. You work side by side until dusk, your silent company more comforting than any words could be. Returning to the hut, you find Agnes preparing soup, her face an unreadable mask as she stirs the pot vigorously. I heard about the messenger, she comments, without looking up. My husband always kept a small cheese for occasions like this. You understand the suggestion behind her words, the ancient knowledge of how to soften demands through small gifts. We have the cheese that was curing in the barn, your wife suggests, hesitantly, referring to the reserve kept for special occasions. Agnes nods once, silent approval of this necessary sacrifice to potentially save much more in the future. Dinner is quiet, each lost in thoughts of what the messenger's visit might mean for the precarious balance they have rebuilt. Night falls like a heavy curtain, bringing with it welcome coolness after the scorching day under the merciless sun. You step outside briefly to gaze at the stars, searching for some pattern, some sign, some assurance in the indifferent sky. The vastness above seems simultaneously comforting and terrifying, the eternity of the stars highlighting the brevity of your existence. Your wife finds you outside, her fingers intertwining with yours in a rare moment of intimacy under the silent witness of the sky. We'll survive, she says simply, words carrying the weight of the belief she tries to instill in both of them. You squeeze her hand in response, the words stuck in your throat from unexpected emotion in the face of this gentle strength. Inside the cabin, Agnes is already preparing the small room for the night, efficient movements born of decades of routine. Sleep comes more slowly tonight, worries about the messenger chasing his thoughts like dogs chasing rabbits. Beside him, his wife breathes deeply, seemingly at peace, despite the uncertainties that tomorrow will bring. Life continues its inexorable flow like a determined river, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always moving. The days pile up like stones in a wall, each supporting the next, creating something greater than their individual parts. Tomorrow the messenger will come, and with him perhaps new difficulties, new adjustments, new needs to adapt. But for tonight, under a repaired roof and with a reasonably full stomach, you allow yourself a moment of gratitude. The challenges of peasant life are as constant as the seasons, predictable in their unpredictability, familiar in their difficulty. Sleep finally envelops you like a worn but still functional blanket, imperfect but sufficient for your immediate needs. And so ends another day in the endless sequence, each one different in detail but similar in essence. The moon watches through. The cracks in the repaired roof, its silvery gaze indifferent to the human dramas it illuminates night after night. How strange it is to see a stranger on your land, like an elegant crow among dusty sparrows, reminding you of the world beyond the village. Dawn arrives with an unusual silence, as if nature itself were holding its breath in anticipation of the imminent visit. You wake up before the rooster crows, sleep having escaped during the night like water through half-closed fingers. The air seems denser today, laden with expectations and apprehensions that weigh heavily on the entire village. Agnes is already awake, of course, her movements around the hut more deliberate than usual, almost ceremonial. The special cheese rests on a clean cloth, its presence a silent reminder of what is at stake today. His wife prepares breakfast with extra care, as if the quality of the meal could somehow influence the events of the day. The porridge seems creamier. This morning, perhaps an egg has been sacrificed for the occasion, a luxury rarely allowed. You eat slowly, savoring each spoonful, gathering strength to face the messenger and his unknown demands. Your Sunday clothes are taken out of the chest, not as fine as those of the feudal lord certainly, but the best you have. The rough fabric scratches your skin in a familiar way, a minor discomfort compared to the anxiety growing in your chest. Outside, the village awakens with nervous energy, each family making similar preparations, all aware of the importance of the day. The sun rises in the clear sky, indifferent to the human concerns swirling beneath its golden rays. You walk to the field, determined to show enough progress to justify leniency, but enough damage to avoid excessive demands. The new seedlings look fragile in the morning light, uncertain promises of a harvest that is still far from guaranteed. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. The messenger arrives mid-morning, riding a horse that seems gigantic compared to the village work animals. His clothes, though dusty from the journey, are of visible quality, the fabric finer than anything worn by the villagers. He dismounts with the practiced grace of someone who spends more time in saddles than on wooden benches, his eyes already assessing everything around him. Old Thomas greets him as the village's unofficial representative, his calm dignity contrasting with the visitor's arrogant bearing. You approach along with other peasants, forming a respectful but cautious semicircle around the newcomer. The messenger unrolls a scroll with unnecessary flourish, his eyes scanning the document before he speaks. By order of Lord Harrick, I have come to assess the damage caused by the storm and determine appropriate adjustments to the taxes, he announces. His voice is surprisingly high-pitched for someone with such an imposing bearing, like a small dog trying to sound like a wolf. The problem is clear: how to navigate this inspection to ensure a favorable outcome without appearing manipulative. The consequences of failure extend beyond his field: hunger in winter, unpayable debts, perhaps even loss of leased land. A partial solution emerges in the form of calculated honesty, showing the true damage but also the effort to recover. We will begin the inspection immediately, the messenger continues, already moving toward the first field without waiting for a response. His authority is like an invisible cloak he carries, needing no physical force to make the peasants clear the way. The sun beats down on his metal brooch, casting reflections that seem to flash like malicious eyes watching the misery of others. Thomas guides the group through the fields, his calm voice explaining the damage and recovery efforts with careful precision. The messenger takes notes in a small notebook, his face an unreadable mask that reveals nothing of his thoughts. When you reach their field, you feel your stomach tighten like a twisted cloth, drops of cold sweat running down your spine. Agnes and his wife are there, as if they sensed your approach, both with carefully neutral expressions. This is Theron's field, Thomas explains, gesturing to the expanse of land that bears the obvious scars of the storm. The messenger observes with sharp eyes, noting the replanted areas, the drainage ditches, the signs of constant labor. "How many weeks of harvest do you estimate you've lost?" he asks directly, his eyes fixed on you like twin daggers. You hesitate, knowing that your answer will determine how much you will have to pay or how much leniency you might receive. "Almost half, sir," you reply, your voice firmer than you expected. "But we are replanting what we can." He jots something down, his face still expressionless, before continuing, "And how long until these new plants produce?" "If the weather cooperates, we might get a late harvest, smaller than normal, but better than nothing," you explain. Agnes steps forward, a small package containing the special cheese discreetly visible in her hands. "We've prepared a small gift for your journey back, sir," she says, her voice softer than you've ever heard it. The messenger looks at the package, a brief flash of interest crossing his face before returning to studied neutrality. "Very kind," he replies, accepting the gift with an almost imperceptible nod. "It will be appreciated on my return." You notice the silent dance that takes place, the unofficial payment that may soften his assessment, the small corruption that everyone accepts. The cheese disappears into his bag with the practiced speed of someone accustomed to receiving such kindnesses on a regular basis. The inspection continues, field after field, the sun rising higher in the sky as the messenger catalogues the misery and the hope. The heat intensifies, causing sweat to trickle down the inside of his Sunday clothes, creating dark stains on the already worn fabric. His mind works like a mill wheel, trying to interpret every expression, every note, every pause of the visitor. At noon, the messenger finally completes his rounds, returning to the center of the village where the peasants gather anxiously. He consults his notes one last time, his eyes scanning the gathered crowd before delivering his verdict. Given the extent of the damage, Lord Harwick will grant a 1/3 reduction in taxes on the next harvest, he announces. A collective sigh ripples through the assembly, relief mixed with concern. Better than nothing, but still a heavy burden. Additionally, he continues, grain will be made available as a loan for replanting, to be repaid at the next harvest. Now murmurs ripple through the group, weighing this seemingly generous offer that carries the weight of future debt. The problem evolves into a new dilemma. Accept help that brings immediate relief, but compromises future harvests. The consequences spread like roots in the soil, growing dependence, less autonomy, a cycle of debt that is difficult to break. The partial solution lies in calculated acceptance. Take only the minimum necessary, work even harder to compensate. Those interested in the grain loan should register with the steward on the next full moon, the messenger concludes. He remounts, with the same efficient grace, looking down literally and figuratively on the assembled peasants. Thomas thanks him formally on behalf of the village, his words carefully measured to show gratitude without excessive subservience. The horse departs in an elegant trot, kicking up dust that hangs in the air, like the concerns that remain after the messenger's departure. The village slowly disperses, small groups forming to discuss the offer, weigh options, calculate risks and benefits. You return to the field with Agnes and her wife, the need for work undiminished by the official visit or its promises. The sun now beats down mercilessly, as if to remind you that regardless of human laws, Nature follows its own rules. Your hands return to their tools with familiarity, the rhythm of work gradually washing away the tension of the morning. Agnes, surprisingly, makes no mention of the sacrificed cheese, perhaps considering the outcome favorable enough to justify the loss. Your wife works with renewed energy, as if the promise of reduced taxes has lifted an invisible weight from her shoulders. The day progresses at its inexorable pace, the sun traveling across the sky like a watchful sentinel over the endless work below. When twilight finally arrives, bringing relief from the heat, you gaze out over the field with tired but satisfied eyes. Small signs of progress are visible to those who know where to look. Straightened plants now stretching firmly toward the sky, soil gradually drying. The return to the cabin brings the familiar comfort of established routines, washing, eating, preparing for a well-deserved rest. Life unfolds like a rug being woven on an ancient loom, each day a thread added to the pattern, some bright, some dull. Agnes prepares a more substantial soup than usual, perhaps in quiet celebration of the inspection results. The evening brings calm discussion about the grain loan, weighing needs against risks, present against future. Just enough for the North. Section, you finally decide, opting for the middle ground between proud rejection and reckless acceptance. Agnes nods approvingly, her expression suggesting that her late husband would have made a similar choice. Sleep comes more easily tonight, the stress of anticipation replaced by the satisfied weariness of a challenge faced. Tomorrow will bring its own set of problems, but for now, you rest in the knowledge of a small victory won. The peasant's life continues its course like a persistent stream, finding its way between rocks and obstacles, always moving forward. And so ends another day, no better or worse than many others, just another step in the long journey of existence. How long does it take for hope to take root, just like the seeds you plant with trembling hands in the reclaimed soil? The days after the messenger's visit flow like water in a revitalized stream, each bringing small signs of improvement. The new seedlings grow slowly but with determination, little green soldiers marching in rows against adversity. You watch every inch of growth like an anxious parent, looking for signs of disease or weakness to be combated. The sky remains mostly clear, the sun providing the heat needed to completely dry the once saturated soil. The routine resumes its familiar rhythm, comforting in its predictability after the chaotic days that followed the storm. Agnes gradually returns to her normal self, her criticism resurfacing like weeds after a brief dormancy. My husband would have finished the chicken coop fence before sunset, she comments as you work on the repair. The return to constant nagging is almost comforting, signaling that life is truly returning to normal. Your wife smiles discreetly beside you, both of you realizing the irony of missing even Agnes's complaints. The work in the fields is as constant as the seasons, each day a repetition of the previous one with minor variations. The earth yields beneath your hands like bread dough being molded, still moist in places but growing firmer. The sun beats down on your back as you bend over the young plants, removing weeds that compete for nutrients. Time drips like crystallized honey from a forgotten jar, thick, slow, resistant to movement, but inevitably flowing. The village gradually returns to normal life, the mill finally repaired and turning again, producing precious flour. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. You head to the mill with your small bag of saved grain, eagerly awaiting the flour that will mean fresh bread. The line is long, other villagers equally eager for this return to normalcy that daily bread represents. The miller works with methodical efficiency, his large hands moving with surprising precision for their size. The sound of the grinding stones is music to your ears, a promise of restored sustenance after days of severe rationing. The smell of grinding grain fills the air, earthy and rich, reminding you of the eternal cycle that sustains life. You wait patiently, exchanging news and observations with neighbors, all sharing the same cautious relief. They say the feudal lord will visit in person next month. 1. Comments, his voice low as if afraid of being heard. Your stomach tightens at this information. The Lord's visit always brings additional demands, forced labor, impossible expectations. The problem looms like a cloud on the clear horizon, distant but undeniably approaching. Preparations for the noble visit. The consequences are as clear as spring water. Extra work on the main road, cleaning the village, possibly sacrificing scarce food. The partial solution is the same as always. Accept the inevitable. Prepare as best you can. Find small ways to minimize losses. When he finally receives his flower, the weight of the sack in his hands is like gold, a promise of truly satisfying meals. The way back home is traveled with lighter steps, despite the disturbing news about the imminent visit. Agnes receives the flower with silent approval already, preparing the dough for bread as you return to the field. The afternoon brings scattered clouds, offering brief moments of shade that are welcomed as gifts from the sky. Your wife works silently beside you, pulling weeds with a determination that suggests each one is a personal demon. Fatigue builds in your muscles like rust on exposed metal, gradual but constant, altering their function. As the sun begins its descent, you assess the day's work with modest satisfaction, each small bit of progress a victory. The return to the hut brings the glorious aroma of baking bread, a scent that makes your stomach rumble in anticipation. Agnes is different tonight, almost excited as she recounts the news she has heard from other women at the communal well. The blacksmith's daughter is marrying the carpenter's son next month, she informs you, her eyes sparkling with interest. A wedding in the village means a party, music, a day off from incessant work, reason enough to celebrate. Your wife listens intently, her hunger for news and events almost as strong as her hunger for fresh bread. You notice her gaze momentarily distant, perhaps remembering her own wedding or imagining the celebration to come. Dinner is the best it has been in weeks. Vegetable soup with a generous chunk of bread still warm from the oven. The flavor explodes in your mouth like colors on a gray day. Intense and comforting after so long of scarcity. Agnes even offers a veiled compliment. This bread reminds me of the ones I used to make when I was your age. Your wife blushes slightly at the rare recognition, her eyes downcast and focused on her own bowl to hide her obvious pleasure. The evening brings a pleasant quiet. The cabin now completely dry, the repaired roof keeping in the day's heat. You sit by the fire working on a new rabbit trap while the women sew by candlelight. The silence is comfortable, like a worn but familiar blanket, punctuated only by the crackling of the wood and occasional movements. Thoughts of the feudal lord's visit try to invade your mind, but you push them away, focusing on the present moment. Tomorrow's problems will be dealt with tomorrow, with the same determination you faced the storm and its aftermath. The consequences of worrying too much are clear. A sleepless night, less energy for work, nothing really resolved. The partial solution is found in accepting what cannot be changed and focusing on what is within your control. Agnes is the first to retire, grumbling about sore knees and the need to wake up before sunrise. When she disappears into her corner, an almost imperceptible sigh of relief escapes his wife's lips. You share a knowing glance, a brief moment of connection that says more than words could ever express. She moves closer, sitting nearer than she would dare with Agnes present, her shoulder lightly touching yours. The fields are recovering well, she comments, her voice soft as the night breeze that occasionally blows through the cracks. You nod, allowing yourself a rare moment of cautious optimism about the harvest and the winter that will inevitably follow. Your hands meet in the space between you, fingers intertwining naturally like roots seeking sustenance in the fertile earth. In these rare moments, you find the strength to carry on, remembering why every drop of sweat, every muscle ache is worth it. The future remains as uncertain as next month's weather. Impossible to predict with certainty, but possible to prepare for. The visit of the feudal lord, the reduced harvest, the approaching winter, problems that will exist regardless of your current concerns. For tonight, you choose the comfort of the moment, hands joined, a safe hut, a stomach reasonably satisfied with fresh bread. Sleep eventually calls irresistible. After a day of physical labor, promising the rest you need to face tomorrow, you lie down side by side on the straw mattress, the shared warmth more comforting than that of the fireplace. Agnes's snoring begins almost immediately, familiar as the night song of crickets or the distant hooting of owls. Your mind gradually calms, thoughts slowing like a mill when the stream that feeds it begins to dry up. Before falling completely asleep, you offer silent thanks for this day, which, though difficult, has brought small comforts. Life continues its course as always. Each day, a small link in the endless chain that connects past and future. And so another day ends in the life of a peasant, marked not by great events, but by small victories. The star-studded night sky watches indifferently, a silent witness to countless lives like yours throughout the centuries. Tomorrow will bring its own set of challenges, but for now, you rest, body and mind temporarily at well-deserved peace. Have you ever wondered how news spreads through the village faster than fire in a field of dry wheat at the height of summer? News of the feudal lord's visit travels to every corner of the community like an invisible wind, impossible to contain. You wake up with the certainty that today will be different, the tension already palpable in the air, even before the first rooster crows. Agnes is especially agitated this morning, rummaging through her few belongings in search of something you can't imagine. "We need to clean the main road," she declares as she serves the thin porridge that constitutes your daily breakfast. Your wife nods silently, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but her mind already calculating the additional work this will entail. You eat quickly, the food going down like a stone in a well, heavy with worry about the demands that will come. The hierarchy of the world imposes itself on you like the layers of the earth itself. The feudal lord looms above like an unreachable sky. The peasants, like the fertile soil, bear the weight of everything, receiving orders that fall like rain, relentless and inevitable. Outside, the village already shows signs of unusual activity, people moving with urgent purpose despite the early hour. Old Thomas organizes work groups in the center of the village, distributing tasks with the efficiency of decades of experience. Theron, you and 4 others will take care of the northern section of the road, he instructs, pointing to the most damaged area. You nod, resigning yourself to a day away from your own field. Precious time redirected to please noble eyes. The EQ problem is clear. Vital work in the field sacrificed for temporary embellishments that feed no one. The consequences are equally clear. Delays in planting, possible loss of an already compromised harvest, less food in winter. A partial solution emerges in the form of pragmatic acceptance. The faster the road is fixed, the sooner you can return to the field. Other men join you, carrying shovels, hoes, and baskets to remove rocks and fill holes in the main road. The sun rises slowly on the horizon, promising another hot day that will make sweat run like salty streams. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Work on the road is different from work in the fields, less rewarding. With no promise of future food, only visible submission, the stones you remove cut into your already calloused hands, adding new wounds to old ones, each one a story of survival. The soil that fills the holes seems to resist your efforts, as if it prefers natural chaos to imposed order. Other villagers pass by carrying the few valuables they own, tin mugs, Less worn towels, preserved pottery. The feudal lord may want to visit some huts, one of them explains. Noticing your questioning look, your stomach tightens at the possibility. Your own hut barely recovered from the storm. Agnes surely dissatisfied with her condition. The morning drags on like a wounded man on a battlefield, each moment prolonged by the awareness of lost time. You work mechanically, your mind divided between the task at hand and concerns about your own temporarily abandoned field. The sun reaches its zenith, relentless in its intensity, turning the road into an open oven where you toil. Your wife appears with a small bundle, containing bread and cheese, her face flushed from the work of cleaning the village. Agnes is reorganizing the entire hut, she informs you between exhausted sighs, her eyes revealing the tension of the day. You share the simple meal, sitting in the rare shade of a lone tree that has grown crooked by the side of the road. The moment of rest is as precious as water in the desert, a brief respite from the constant toil that defines your days. They say you will bring soldiers and servants, she comments, her voice low as if afraid of being heard by the bushes. You nod, imagining the spectacle of horses, armor, and fine fabrics that will soon invade the simplicity of the village. The food, though simple, temporarily invigorates your body, allowing you to face the second half of the endless day. Your wife returns to her own duties, a figure dwindling in the distance like your hopes of finishing work early. The afternoon brings occasional clouds, small mercies that briefly block the scorching sun before being carried away by the wind. Sweat pours constantly, soaking your already stained shirt, creating maps of salt as it dries on your sunburned skin. Your back protests with every movement. Muscles unaccustomed to this specific type of work sending waves of pain through your body. The road gradually takes shape under their collective efforts. Holes filled, stones removed, the surface more even than before. Thomas stops by to inspect the progress, nodding in silent approval before moving on to the next work group. The hours drag on like chained prisoners, heavy and reluctant, each one a test of endurance and determination. When the sun finally begins its descent, the assigned section of road is complete, transformed by forced labor. You return to the village with heavy steps, every muscle begging for rest, every thought focused on food and sleep. The sight that meets your eyes is surprising. The village looks different, streets swept clean, fences repaired, wildflowers in makeshift vases. Even the huts look different, thatch tidied, walls patched, small touches of pride on each door. Your own hut has undergone a similar transformation, Agnes having conducted a relentless campaign of cleaning and organization during your absence. The interior smells of dried herbs and beeswax, an almost forgotten fragrance of better times and extra care. Your few possessions have been rearranged, each object at its best angle, like actors positioned for an important performance. Agnes watches your reaction with watchful eyes, seeking approval you rarely offer for your own constant efforts. It's different, you comment, knowing that any criticism would be unfair after so much clearly dedicated work. A quasi-smile crosses her wrinkled face, brief as a distant lightning bolt, but equally surprising in its rarity. Your wife serves the evening meal, simple but carefully presented in her best bowls, normally reserved for special occasions. The familiar taste of the usual stew is enhanced by the unusual setting, each spoonful a small ritual in a transformed environment. Tomorrow we'll finish the preparations, Agnes informs you between measured spoonfuls. Then we'll return to the fields before it's too late. You nod, relieved that she also recognizes the need to balance the demands of the lordship with actual survival. The conversation revolves around the details of the impending visit. When exactly? How long? What specific expectations? No one knows. For sure, information arriving in contradictory fragments, each person adding their own interpretation to the rumors. Exhaustion gradually silences even curiosity, eyes heavy as grain sacks, muscles begging for horizontal rest. Agnes is surprisingly the first to suggest that everyone retire early, recognizing the obvious exhaustion on their faces. The straw mattress has never seemed so inviting, his body sinking into the familiar surface with almost audible gratitude. His wife lies down beside him, closer than usual, as if seeking additional comfort after a particularly difficult day. Sleep comes quickly tonight, heavy and deep as an ancient well, dragging him down with no resistance possible. Confused dreams permeate his rest. The feudal lord inspecting his field with a giant magnifying glass, Agnes curtsying like a noble lady. Dawn arrives too early, as always, tearing him from his restful sleep to face another day of forced preparations. Breakfast is consumed in practical silence, energy conserved for the tasks that already wait impatiently. Outside, the second day of communal work begins with increased efficiency, everyone now familiar with their specific responsibilities. You are assigned to help rebuild the platform where the Lord will address the village. A temporary wooden structure. The smell of fresh sawdust fills the air as you work, a resinous aroma that almost masks the sweat of your laboring bodies. Hammers strike in an almost musical rhythm, transforming rough logs into a structure that will support temporary but absolute authority. Hands develop new blisters over old calluses, layers of suffering overlapping like the history of your own existence. Time passes differently today, with a clear purpose and visible end, making each hour less drawn out than those of the previous day. By noon, the platform is complete, simple but solid, capable of supporting the weight of the nobility and their expectations. You observe the finished. Work with complex satisfaction, pride in the concrete result mixed with resentment at the necessity. Thomas dismisses his group early, allowing them to return to their own fields to make up for time lost in the preparations. The path to your field has never seemed so urgent, each step taking you back to the work that really matters. The sight of the young plants greets you like a visual embrace, their green intensified by the high sun, creating a carpet of promise. Weeds have taken advantage of your absence to grow with renewed boldness, competing aggressively with the plants you protect so fiercely. You attack the task with energy born of accumulated frustration. Each weed pulled a small victory against unfair circumstances. The sun continues its journey across the perfect blue sky, a silent witness to the return to the routine that sustains life. And so the days pass, divided between preparations to impress and work to survive, a precarious but necessary balance. The visit of the feudal lord looms on the horizon like a distant storm cloud, inevitable but not yet immediately threatening. Life continues its course like a determined river, skirting obstacles, finding new paths, always moving forward. How to describe the silent terror that precedes the arrival of someone who could destroy your life with a simple nod of the head? The morning of the feudal lord's visit dawns with an eerie silence, as if even the birds recognize the importance of the day. You wake up before Agnes, a rare feat caused more by anxiety than discipline. The air seems different today, heavy with expectation and apprehension, each breath as heavy as a sip of muddy water. Your Sunday clothes were carefully prepared the night before, cleaned as never before, and mended in the most visible places. Breakfast is almost ceremonial, every movement measured and precise, as if, rehearsing for the performance to come, Agnes finally breaks the silence, her voice strangely soft. Remember to lower your eyes when he passes. His wife nods nervously, her fingers repeatedly smoothing the fabric of her best skirt, an unconscious gesture of anxiety. Outside, the village seems unrecognizable, transformed by days of frantic work into an idealized version of itself. The dirt. Roads have been leveled and swept, the huts repaired and decorated. Even the children seem cleaner. Tension grows in the village like yeast in bread dough, expanding invisibly but undeniably with each passing moment. All the villagers converge on the center, dressed in their best clothes, forming orderly lines according to prior instructions. The distant sound of horses makes the hearts of the entire village leap, as if they all share the same nervous beat. You take your place in the designated line, Agnes and his wife positioned among the other women a few steps behind. The dust on the horizon announces the arrival of the procession even before distinct. Figures can be discerned by the eager eye. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. The gleam of polished metal catches the morning sun, spears and armor creating reflections that seem to herald approaching divinity. First come the mounted guards, their faces impassive beneath partial helmets, their eyes scanning the crowd like hawks searching for prey, their upright posture on well-fed horses projects authority like a shadow at midday, impossible to ignore or question. Next come the higher-ranking servants, dressed in fine but practical clothes, their expressions a mixture of borrowed importance and obvious disdain. Finally, the feudal lord himself, Lord Harwick, mounted on a black stallion that seems to be made of solidified night. His presence falls upon the village like the first frost of autumn, silent but transformative, marking the end of a season. The clothes he wears probably cost more than his family has ever owned in generations combined. The fabric glistens in the sun, vibrant colors that seem almost offensive compared to the faded hues worn by the peasants. His face is surprisingly young for such authority, refined features that have never known physical labor or true hunger. The silence is absolute as he dismounts with practiced grace, only the rustling of leaves daring to disturb the moment. Thomas approaches with his head bowed, offering formal greetings that sound rehearsed but sincere in their simplicity. The problem presents itself in the most intimidating form possible, pleasing someone whose whims control your fate like a puppet. The consequences of failure are known to all: increased taxes, additional forced labor, perhaps even physical punishment. The partial solution lies in calculated submission, in the precise balance between demonstrated respect and complete self-effacement. Lord Harwick slowly makes his way through the rows, occasionally stopping to ask brief questions or observe something with feigned interest. His gaze passes over you without pause, a relief that makes your knees almost buckle with the released tension. The platform built with such effort serves its purpose as the Lord steps up to survey the village from his elevated position. His voice, when he finally speaks, is surprisingly clear and strong, his formal education evident in every perfectly pronounced syllable. "I am pleased with the recovery after the storm," he declares, his words falling on you like coins tossed to beggars. Murmurs of gratitude ripple through the ranks, heads bowing in recognition of the generosity implied in his mere satisfaction. The reduction in taxes will remain as agreed, he continues, and additional seeds will be provided for immediate replanting. This unexpected news elicits audible sighs of relief, the peasant equivalent of extravagant celebrations in different circumstances. You feel your wife's gaze seeking yours, momentarily sharing the hope that these generous words inspire. The Lord continues to speak of loyalty, hard work, and rewards for the faithful, beautiful words floating in the air like feathers. Your mind quickly calculates what additional seeds will mean for your harvest, for winter, for survival. The visit continues with Lord Harwick inspecting selected parts of the village, his entourage following like an elaborate shadow. Everyone breathes easier as he passes by, tension momentarily relieved until the next person is scrutinized. To your surprise and horror, the feudal lord stops in front of your hut, his eyes assessing the modest structure with unexpected interest. Was this house particularly affected by the storm? He asks no one in particular, his gaze sweeping over the newly repaired roof. Thomas quickly identifies you as the owner, his outstretched arm instantly turning you into the center of attention. You step forward with legs like wooden planks, your mouth suddenly as dry as dust in the height of summer. "Yes, my lord," you manage to reply, your eyes carefully fixed on a point just below the nobleman's clean-shaven chin. "Proper repairs," he comments, his head tilting slightly. "Competent work for a simple peasant." The ambiguous compliment hangs in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp, but undeniably present in its condescending aroma. "Show me your field," he orders suddenly, not a request but a command that does not consider the possibility of refusal. Your heart races like a frightened horse, fear and confusion swirling in a whirlwind that threatens to make you dizzy. You guide the Lord and some of his companions along the familiar path, each step a small eternity of anxiety. The field has never seemed so vulnerable as it does now, exposed to the critical gaze of someone who has never planted a single grain. The young plants seem to shrink under noble scrutiny. Greener than usual under the harsh sun, Lord Harwick walks carefully between the rows, his fine leather boots incongruous against the simple earth that sustains them. "You replanted this section recently," he observes, not a question, but a display of knowledge that surprises you. "Yes, my lord," you confirm, amazed that he can distinguish between recent plantings and those that survived the storm. He nods thoughtfully, his eyes sweeping the expanse of the field with an expression you cannot quite decipher. "Good work," he finally declares, simple words that fall on you like rain after a long drought, unexpected and revitalizing. The return to the village is silent, your mind replaying the encounter over and over, searching for traps or hidden meanings. In Arson, the central square, Lord Harwick makes final announcements about roads to be improved and expectations for the next harvest. The formality of the visit gradually dissolves as he returns to his horse, preparing to leave with his entourage. A last glance sweeps across the assembly, pausing briefly on you with an expression that could be recognition or just coincidence. The departure is almost as ceremonial as the arrival, dust rising like a curtain, closing after an elaborate performance. Only when the last figure disappears over the horizon does the village collectively exhale, tension draining like water from a wrung-out cloth. Conversations explode on all sides, each person sharing observations, interpretations, and speculations about what they have witnessed. Agnes, surprisingly, remains silent, her distant eyes suggesting that her mind is processing events at its own deliberate pace. Your wife remains close by, her fingers occasionally touching your arm, as if to confirm that the experience was shared and real. "Why did he choose our field?" she finally asks, her voice low as if she fears that questioning will attract bad luck. You shake your head, equally confused by the unexpected attention, cautiously optimistic but instinctively suspicious of favoritism. The rest of the day passes, in a state of unreality, as if the entire village is floating a few inches above the ground. Normal work gradually resumes, though conversations remain focused exclusively on the visit and its possible implications. You return to the field later, now viewing it with new eyes, trying to see what attracted the gentleman's attention. The plants are the same, the earth unchanged, but something about the encounter has transformed your perception like subtle magic. The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows that seem to point to a future slightly altered by the noble visit. In the cabin, Agnes finally breaks her silence during dinner. "He noticed you. That could be good or bad." Her blunt analysis cuts through the illusions like a sharp knife, reminding you that attention from the powerful rarely comes without a price. The night brings calmer discussions about the promised seeds, cautious plans forming like crystals in a saturated solution. Sleep comes restlessly tonight, dreams populated by black horses and inscrutable gazes. promises floating like leaves in the wind. Tomorrow will bring a return to normality, to the constant tasks that define his existence more than occasional visits from nobles. Life continues its determined course, moment by moment, breath by breath, regardless of who observes or judges its flow. And so ends another extraordinary day in the ordinary existence of a peasant, briefly marked by the shadow of nobility. How can you explain the strange feeling of being noticed when your entire life has been built on the art of remaining invisible? The promised seeds arrive 3 days after the visit, brought by a minor servant of the feudal lord in a simple cart. You watch from the entrance to your field, your body tense as a bowstring, while the man consults a list. To your surprise, he calls your name first, gesturing for you to approach while measuring out a generous portion of grain. The stares of the other peasants weigh on your back like sacks of stones, curiosity and envy mixed in equal measure. The servant hands you the sack with practiced indifference, marking something on his parchment before calling the next name. The weight of the seeds in his arms is simultaneously comforting and unsettling, a material blessing and an unexpected social burden. You return to the field quickly, avoiding questioning glances, feeling inexplicably guilty for this small advantage. Life bends like reeds in a strong wind, adapting to unexpected circumstances that threaten to upset the previous balance. The field waits patiently, the earth prepared to receive these new seeds that arrive laden with expectations and suspicions. Your fingers work methodically, creating precise furrows where each grain will be placed as a buried promise of a better future. The sun watches your efforts with golden indifference, the heat intensifying the smell of the earth recently turned over by your hands. Agnes surprisingly avoids direct comments about favoritism, although her eyes communicate volumes of unspoken thoughts. His wife works silently at his side, occasionally casting glances that mix concern and pride in equal measure. The problem emerges like a persistent weed. Unwanted attention creates divisions. In a community where harmony is essential for survival, the consequences are already evident in colder greetings, conversations that cease when you approach, and averted glances. The partial solution lies in even harder work, demonstrating that any advantage will be converted into a benefit for all. The following days establish a new rhythm with hours in, the field extending beyond the norm, as if compensating for undeserved favors. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. The earth eagerly receives the new seeds, residual moisture from the storm now transformed into an ally to germinate life. Your muscles protest against the additional effort, each night bringing deeper pains that penetrate to the bone. The miller greets you with exaggerated formality at Dambo. The weekly market, his voice carrying a slightly mocking tone. How's our favorite doing? You swallow the sharp reply that threatens to escape, offering only a short nod as you continue with your necessary exchanges. Rumors grow like fungus on damp wood, spreading invisibly but persistently through the whispered conversations of the village. Some say you are distantly related to the feudal lord, others that you rendered some secret service deserving of reward. The most malicious stories suggest shady deals, your wife mentioned in contexts that make your blood boil with indignation. Agnes surprisingly becomes your silent defender, her sharp, gaze-silencing gossip that occasionally reaches your hut. Let them talk, she advises during a particularly quiet dinner. Words don't grow crops or fill empty stomachs. Her unexpected wisdom falls on you like a heavy but comforting blanket, protecting you from the cold of others' malice. Your wife nods in agreement, her eyes revealing a new appreciation for the mother-in-law, who is usually a constant source of irritation. The field shows the first signs of new seeds, timid sprouts emerging from the soil like hesitant truths after prolonged lies. You watch this small, repeated miracle with renewed reverence, each plant physical proof against rumors and suspicions. The work continues its relentless pace, the seasons advancing indifferent to human complications, nature following its own unforgiving calendar. Old Thomas appears in your field one morning, a bony figure casting a long shadow over the recently worked earth. The village council is meeting. Today, he informs you without preamble, your presence is requested after sunset. His stomach tightens like a clenched fist, immediate anxiety replacing the hunger that normally accompanies hours of hard work. The council rarely summons specific individuals except to resolve disputes or address behavior that threatens community harmony. Thomas leaves without elaboration, leaving you with tools suspended in your hands, paralyzed by surprise and growing apprehension. The day drags on like a snail on dry rock, each moment prolonged by the anticipation of the encounter that awaits at dusk. Your wife receives the news with wide eyes, her hands automatically searching for a protective amulet hidden in the folds of her clothing. Agnes keeps her expression unreadable, though a deeper wrinkle between her eyebrows reveals a concern she would never verbalize. Twilight arrives with cruel deliberation, colors intensified as if the sky itself were dramatizing the decisive moment. The communal hut where the council meets casts yellow light through small windows, silhouettes moving like theatrical shadows. You enter with measured steps, aware of the eyes that follow your every movement, like predators assessing potential prey or threat. The village elders form a solemn semicircle, their wrinkled faces illuminated by the central fire like ancient masks. Thomas gestures for you to take a seat in the center, a position traditionally reserved for the accused or those under community scrutiny. The silence hangs heavy like thick fog, broken only by the occasional crackle of burning wood and deliberately controlled breathing. Theron, begins the eldest of the counselors, we have been informed that you will be given additional responsibility by the feudal lord. The statement hangs in the air like smoke, incomprehensible in its meaning, but undeniably laden with important implications. His confusion must be evident on his face, for Thomas quickly elaborates. A messenger arrived today. You will be assistant. Inspector? The words hit like stones, each incomprehensible individually, but forming an avalanche of implications when combined. Assistant Inspector? You repeat, your voice sounding strange to your own ears, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. The elder nods gravely, explaining that you will oversee harvest measurements and grain quality before delivery. The problem crystallizes instantly. A position among your peers and authority, a divided loyalty that no farmer wants. The consequences unfold in your mind like a scroll being opened. Intensified resentment, social isolation, overwhelming responsibilities. The partial solution remains nebulous, vague possibilities including refusal, dangerous, reluctant acceptance, compromising, or something in between that is still undefined. I did not ask for this position, you finally reply, your words carefully chosen so as not to offend. Either side. No one suggested it, Thomas replies quickly. The choice was yours, perhaps based on your recent inspection. Glances assess your reaction, some looking for signs of pride or ambition that would justify previous suspicions. You maintain a neutral expression with conscious effort, hands clasped to hide a slight tremor that could be misinterpreted. When do I start? You finally ask, implicitly acknowledging that refusal is not a real option when orders come from the Lord. On the next moon, the council replies. You will receive complete instructions and appropriate measuring tools for the task. The meeting ends with tense formality, each man avoiding direct eye contact as they leave the hut in heavy silence. You remain momentarily alone in the center, a solitary figure illuminated by the dying fire, your physical position mirroring your social isolation. The road home has never seemed so long, each step taking you deeper into unknown and potentially dangerous territory. Night envelops the village like a protective cloak. hiding expressions and allowing true emotions to finally surface. Agnes and your wife wait anxiously. They're tense, faces illuminated by the single candle they have kept burning during your absence. The words come out heavy as stones from your mouth as you explain the situation, each syllable carrying disturbing implications. Agnes surprisingly offers no criticism, only thoughtful nods that suggest she is processing information on multiple levels. Your wife moves closer, her hand finding yours in the space between you. Simple contact communicating support without words. It's opportunity and danger together, Agnes finally declares, summing up the situation perfectly in her characteristic direct manner. Sleep flees like a frightened animal tonight. Thoughts chasing each other in circles as you contemplate the altered future. Tomorrow the field will wait as always, indifferent to human complications, plants needing the same care regardless of new titles. Life continues its relentless flow, carrying everyone in its current, some momentarily elevated, only to be leveled again. And, so another chapter is written in the simple story of a farmer, unexpected complexities emerging from the previously predictable plot. How is it possible that simple words can transform your existence more completely than any storm or disease ever could? The days after the council meeting unfold like damaged parchment, familiar in form, but altered in content. The field welcomes you as always, indifferent to human complications, earth and plants obeying only the laws of nature. Your hands work automatically, your body following established routines while your mind navigates unknown territories of possibilities and threats. Your new title hangs over you like a crow perched on a fragile branch, a constant presence threatening to unbalance your existence. The other farmers keep their distance now, conversations ceasing when you approach, greetings reduced to brief nods. Loneliness grows around you like a fence of thorns, each day adding a new layer of social isolation. Agnes surprisingly becomes a source of practical advice, her life experience offering perspective you didn't expect. Keep double records, she suggests during a quiet dinner, one for the master and one for yourself. Your wife watches with worried eyes, torn between pride in the trust shown and fear of the complications to come. The problem crystallizes like ice in still water. How to serve two masters without betraying either, or himself. The consequences spread in all directions like the roots of an ancient tree, penetrating every aspect of his previously simple life. A partial solution slowly emerges, deep knowledge as a shield, transparency as a weapon, balance as a constant goal. The messenger arrives a week later, carrying a small wooden box containing measuring instruments carefully wrapped in fine cloth. The weight of the box in his hands is disproportionate to its size, each tool representing responsibility and expectation. Written. Instructions accompany the instruments, parchment covering details that make his head spin with unexpected complexity. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. His limited but functional reading ability now proves more valuable than any physical skill he has ever possessed. The messenger explains basic procedures with ill-concealed impatience, clearly, considering time spent with a peasant a waste. You absorb information, like dry earth absorbs rain, eager to grasp every detail that could prevent future mistakes. The small but precise scale, rulers marked with strange symbols, equivalence tables, each item a mystery to decipher. The sun watches this impromptu lesson with golden indifference, time ticking away as you struggle to understand your new role. When the messenger finally leaves, you remain holding dangerous knowledge, simultaneously empowered and terribly vulnerable. Agnes examines the instruments with cautious respect, wrinkled, fingers touching polished metal as if checking its physical reality. "My father knew an inspector once," she comments casually. "He ended up hanging by his thumbs when the numbers didn't add up. The comment falls like a stone into a quiet well, waves of implication expanding in ever-widening circles. Your wife visibly pales, her hands automatically forming a protective gesture as her eyes seek yours in silent alarm. You carefully store the instruments in the small chest that holds your few valuables, locking it with new determination. The field continues to demand constant attention, plants growing with renewed vigor, thanks to the extra seeds and occasional rains. The days pass in a precarious balance between usual work and nighttime study of the instructions that will determine your near future. Father Jerome watches you with renewed interest during Sunday Mass, curiosity evident in his approach after the service. "I heard about your new responsibility," he comments, his eyes assessing your reaction, a heavy burden for shoulders not yet tested. You nod without elaborating, aware of the attentive ears that pick up every word exchanged in the vicinity of the church. The priest smiles slightly, adding almost casually, "My door is open if you need advice on accounting." The offer hangs in the air like a lingering perfume, its deeper meaning evident despite the apparent simplicity of the words. You thank him with careful neutrality, mentally filing away this possibility as you walk away with your family toward the cabin. Old Thomas appears in your field the next morning, a familiar figure, but now carrying the weight of official purpose. The council has decided that you will need assistance with your own field when you are performing inspection duties, he informs you. Your heart races at the implications of this seemingly benevolent statement, help offered or surveillance imposed in the guise of assistance. Thomas senses your hesitation, adding in a softer voice, "We are a community, Theron. No one survives here alone." The truth in these words is as undeniable as the rising sun, a fundamental reality that transcends temporary complications of status. You accept the offer with cautious gratitude, recognizing both the gesture of good faith and the subtle control implied. The problem evolves like a disease changing symptoms, no longer simple isolation, but complex integration with constant supervision. The consequences branch out like paths in a dense forest, each choice eliminating possibilities while creating new realities. A partial solution emerges in the form of strategic transparency, sharing, enough knowledge to build trust without losing advantage. Measuring instruments become constant companions in your spare time, your hands becoming familiar with their weight and function. Agnes watches your efforts with silent approval, occasionally offering insightful observations born of decades of watching authorities in action. Never let them see uncertainty, she advises as you practice with the scale. Doubt invites questioning. Your wife contributes in practical ways, sewing a special bag to carry the instruments, memorizing tables to test your knowledge. The village watches your preparations with collective curiosity, opinions divided on your chances of success in this unlikely role. Bets are placed in the tavern on how long you will last, information that reaches you through sympathetic whispers. The first official inspection approaches with the initial harvest of early vegetables, a small test before the great responsibilities to come. You wake before dawn on this momentous day, your stomach knotted in a knot that seems impossible to untie. Agnes surprisingly prepares a special small breakfast, even including a precious egg that would normally be sold or traded. You need strength today. Wakawai, she explains simply when she notices your questioning look at her unusual generosity. Your wife smooths your best clothes, fingers ironing out imperfections with a determination that suggests she could ward off hardship through physical effort. The walk to the community vegetable fields has never seemed so long, each step simultaneously, very fast and terribly slow. Other inspectors are already present when you arrive, older men with impenetrable expressions sizing you up without words. Chief Inspector, a man named Godwin, indicates your place with a brief movement of his chin. No formal introduction offered. You take your designated position. Instruments prepared according to instructions. Your face carefully composed into a mask of competence you don't really feel. The peasants arrive with their harvests, baskets of spring vegetables laden with equal parts pride and anxiety. The first measurement tests every nerve in your body, your hands almost betraying your nervousness as you handle the scales and tables. Godwin watches without comment, his sharp eyes missing nothing, his expression revealing even less about his assessment of your performance. You breathe deeply, letting your training guide your movements, each number carefully checked and recorded according to the procedures you have learned. The sun rises in the sky, the heat intensifying, along with the pressure of eyes watching every movement, every decision, every note. Other inspectors occasionally offer whispered corrections, some genuinely helpful, others seemingly designed to destabilize your fragile concentration. Hours pass in constant tension, each measurement simultaneously a technical challenge and a test of character under relentless scrutiny. When the last basket is finally weighed, recorded, and released, your muscles tremble from the effort of maintaining precision under pressure. Godwin reviews your records with intimidating thoroughness, each pause in his reading sending waves of anxiety down your spine. Acceptable, he finally declares, the single word falling like a court verdict, neither full praise nor condemnation, just conditional tolerance. You exhale slowly, only then, realizing that you've been holding your breath while awaiting judgment on your first day. The return home is spent in a peculiar state of exhaustion, your body not particularly tired, but your mind completely drained. Agnes receives your silent report with genuine interest, her astute eyes picking up nuances that others might easily miss. You survived your first day, she observes, with a rare smile. That's more than many manage. Your wife serves a simple but comforting dinner, the warmth of the soup seeming to restore something beyond mere physical energy. The night brings reflections on this new path, where each step seems to balance between worlds that were once separate and are now painfully united. The knowledge gained today weighs like a stone in his pocket, simultaneously a tool and a burden that cannot simply be discarded. Tomorrow will bring a return to his own field, his hands once again dirty with familiar soil instead of ink and numbers. But something fundamental has changed. Like a river altering its course after a storm, a new direction established that cannot be easily reversed. And so ends his first day. As a man divided between worlds, peasant and authority, servant of two masters. Sleep finally arrives as a reluctant visitor, offering brief oblivion before dawn brings new challenges to the horizon. How can a man remain the same when the world around him begins to treat him like a stranger in his own land? The weeks after his first inspection mark a new phase in his existence as defined as the seasons of the year. You work in your field as always, your back bent over the earth, your calloused hands, guiding tools with familiar precision. But something has fundamentally changed, like wine that has turned to vinegar, still liquid, still originating from the same grapes, but irrevocably transformed. Other peasants who once shared water or tools now keep a respectful but unmistakably intentional distance. Conversations cease when you approach the communal fountain, resuming in lower tones only when you move away. The tavern, once a weekly refuge of simple camaraderie, now feels like hostile territory where your every word is weighed and measured. Agnes surprisingly offers comfort in her direct way. They'd rather make up stories about you than face their own failures. His wife suffers indirectly, other women including her in conversations, but avoiding certain topics when she is present. The weight of this new existence settles on his shoulders like a lead cloak, invisible to the eye, but crushing in its presence. The fields continue to grow, indifferent to human complications, plants stretching toward the sun with simple, enviable determination. You often look at your measuring instruments at night, familiarizing yourself with every aspect, transforming strangeness into competence. The problem manifests itself as a growing division between your two roles, peasant struggling for survival and representative of feudal authority. The consequences seep into every aspect of your life. Social, isolation, undermined trust, loyalties constantly questioned by everyone. A partial solution emerges in the form of deliberate separation, different versions of yourself for different contexts and needs. Inspection days become more frequent as initial crops mature, requiring regular presence among other inspectors. Godwin gradually shows reluctant approval, corrections becoming less frequent, occasionally even offering restrained praise. You learn the unspoken language of numbers, how small adjustments can mean the difference between hunger and survival for families. Your own harvest benefits from the extra seeds, plants growing with a vigor that seems almost apologetic in its abundance. Thomas and others fulfill their promise of assistance, helping with heavier tasks when official duties require their absence. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. The village now exists in a tense state of equilibrium, its new position simultaneously resented and exploited when convenient. Father Jouon becomes an unexpected ally. Conversations after, Mass offering valuable insight into navigating different worlds. There has always been a distance between what is written and what is fair. He comments enigmatically after Sunday service. You reflect on these words during long nights, weighing concepts of loyalty, justice, and survival on an invisible scale. Agnes shows quiet pride in her adaptation, now rarely mentioning her late husband as an impossible standard of comparison. You have a good eye for numbers. Heed Sapor, she remarks one evening, watching you review records by the dim candlelight. Your wife weaves new clothes for inspection days, simple fabric but carefully crafted to project authority without ostentation. Summer advances inexorably, the heat intensifying along with the pace of work, each day longer than the last. Your routine now alternates between the fields and inspections, your identity flowing between worlds like water, finding its way between different banks. On market days, merchants treat you differently, offering small discounts or samples. Investments in future goodwill. You carefully balance these unsolicited privileges, accepting only what you could openly justify, rejecting the rest with polite firmness. The summer heat turns into a furnace during a particularly brutal period of cloudless days, the earth cracking under the relentless sun. Your skin darkens like leather, exposed to the elements, constant sweat creating trails of salt that itch unbearably against rough clothing. Plants show signs of stress, leaves wilting in the hottest hours, demanding extra attention and carefully rationed watering. Night brings temporary relief, the air cooling just enough to allow a few hours of sleep before the heat returns. Agnes often sits outside the hut during these sweltering nights, her distant gaze suggesting memories of equally brutal summers. In times like these, the well becomes more valuable than gold, she comments, practical wisdom passed down as an unsolicited inheritance. Her wife shares techniques learned from her own mother to preserve vegetables that would not survive the intense heat. Knowledge flows between generations like water into parched soil, absorbed quickly out of necessity rather than simple curiosity. Inspections become additional challenges during this period, heat distorting measurements, tempers becoming short as burning wicks. You learn techniques to compensate, weighing quickly. Before the sun affects moisture, calculating dehydration rates for fair adjustments. Godwin observes these adaptations with silent approval, occasionally incorporating his techniques into instructions for other, younger inspectors. His position, gradually solidifies, neither completely accepted nor openly rejected, existing in an intermediate space of practical tolerance. The problem evolves as you evolve, less about external acceptance and more about internal reconciliation of seemingly contradictory identities. The consequences of this precarious balance manifest themselves in restless nights, constantly questioned decisions, loyalties, always under internal scrutiny. A partial solution emerges through small victories, measurements favoring starving families, discreet advice saving threatened crops. Summer reaches its peak, heat becoming an almost tangible entity, an oppressive presence that dominates every aspect of existence. Rumors arrive of disease in neighboring villages, fevers spreading through, bodies weakened by the combination of hard work and extreme heat. Fear spreads faster than any disease, anxious glances following travelers, doors closing to unfamiliar faces. You find new purpose in this period of uncertainty. Your knowledge of writing allowing you to record preventive measures shared by the priest, Agnes, surprises you again, revealing extensive knowledge of medicinal plants that could strengthen resistance to potential diseases. My mother was a healer before she married, she explained simply. Decades of silence about this aspect of her history. Your wife absorbs this knowledge, eagerly skilled hands preparing infusions and poultices under the guidance of her once criticized mother-in-law. An undeclared truce settles between the two women, a shared purpose bridging years of tension and resentment. The priest officially blesses the remedies during a special mass, legitimizing knowledge that, in earlier times, might have attracted dangerous suspicion. You watch this transformation with silent fascination, like an observer of the changing tide, imperceptible moment by moment, undeniable over time. Your own position in the community shifts subtly during this period, your role as inspector temporarily eclipsed by a new communal utility. The written record of medicinal recipes becomes a valuable document, frequently consulted by those who previously avoided your company. The problem transforms again, unfolding like a complex flower, each petal revealing a new dimension of challenge and opportunity. The consequences of this evolution manifest themselves in partial reinstatements, invitations to communal meals, and inclusion in important discussions about preparations against disease. A partial solution emerges in the form of an expanded purpose, not only as a mediator between peasants and lord, but also as a bridge between knowledge and need. The heat finally begins to subside as the days imperceptibly shorten, the first sign of the still distant but inevitable autumn. The main harvests are approaching, golden fields rippling under occasional breezes like a terrestrial sea, promising sustenance for months to come. His responsibility as inspector will increase significantly during this critical period, with real tests of loyalty and justice fast approaching. Agnes prepares like a general for a decisive battle, organizing storage, planning preservation, calculating needs with precision born of experience. This year will be different, she declares with unusual confidence. We have knowledge we didn't have before. Her wife nods in silent agreement, her eyes revealing a complex mixture of cautious hope and lingering concern. You meticulously review your instruments and records, preparing for the responsibility you will carry in the crucial weeks ahead. The balance you have found, though imperfect and constantly challenged, offers a foundation upon which a future could be built. The field you have cultivated with such effort promises a generous harvest, the plants responding to the extra care with almost grateful productivity. Nights become occasions for detailed planning, three voices contributing different perspectives on common problems, creating unlikely but effective solutions. The life that once seemed simple in its difficulties now reveals previously invisible complexities, layers of meaning and possibility. You watch stars through a small opening in the repaired roof, constant points of light reminding you that some things remain unchanged. Sleep comes more easily now, your body exhausted but your mind less tormented. A precarious balance found between previously incompatible worlds. Tomorrow will bring a new combination of familiar and unexpected challenges, as it always has and always will in country life. The difference now lies not in external circumstances, but in your internal perspective, an expanded vision that transforms limitations into possibilities. And so another chapter unfolds in a life you never imagined for yourself, a destiny woven from forced choices and unexpected opportunities. The moon watches your sleep with serene indifference, a silent witness to countless similar lives throughout immemorial centuries. How heavy is the weight of responsibility when the survival of an entire village may depend on the marks you make on a parchment? Autumn arrives with the subtlety of an experienced thief, stealing warmth from the sun in small, almost imperceptible increments each day. The fields around the village are transformed into a golden, undulating carpet, each ear of corn carrying promises of bread or threats of hunger. You wake before dawn, your body anticipating the crucial days ahead, your muscles tense even before work begins. Agnes is already awake, of course, organizing baskets and harvesting tools with an efficiency born of decades of repeated cycles. The air carries a different scent now, the sweetness of ripe grain mixed with dry earth and the cool dew of autumn mornings. Your wife prepares provisions for long days in the fields, bread carefully wrapped in clean cloth, fresh water in a canteen. The double responsibilities weigh on your shoulders like stacked sacks of grain, farmer harvesting and inspector measuring, simultaneous and contradictory. The plan they have developed is as precise as a sundial. You will work your own field in the early hours, then inspect others. Godwin reluctantly agreed to this arrangement, recognizing the practical impossibility of completely separating his two existences during harvest time. The problem crystallizes like frost on a leaf, balancing fairness in measurements with the need for survival for the entire community. These consequences of mistakes now amplify like echoes in a cave. Low yields mean hunger in winter. High yields mean punishment from the Lord. A partial solution emerges in the form of shared knowledge, teaching others to understand fair measurements, creating a system that will survive beyond you. The sun finally emerges, a golden bath transforming the fields into an almost sacred vision, each individual plant part of an impressive collective abundance. Your feet follow a familiar path to your own field. The earth beneath your soles already hardened by the night cold that anticipates coming frosts. The harvesting tools wait in line like patient soldiers, sharp sickles, sturdy baskets, a small cart borrowed from a neighbor. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Agnes and his wife work in surprising sync, years of tension temporarily forgotten in the face of immediate shared need. Their hands move with a memory of their own, cutting ears of corn with practiced precision, each movement saving energy for the long hours ahead. Sweat forms despite the cool air running down their faces as liquid proof of the effort that sustains all human existence. Other farmers work in neighboring fields, all bent in identical postures, humanity momentarily unified by the ancestral rhythm of the harvest. The sun rises higher, the heat increasing, the perfect blue sky without. Clouds promising a full day of work uninterrupted by rain. Baskets fill quickly. Golden mounds growing as physical testimony to months of work, worry, and hope finally realized. Your back protests after hours in the same position, a familiar pain you almost welcome as a friend, a reliable sign of productive work. Thomas appears at noon with two other men, fulfilling his promise to help as you transition to the role of inspector. The gratitude you feel is as deep as a well-dug pit, a moment of community connection that transcends recent tensions and mistrust. You wash your hands and face in water, brought especially for this purpose, a symbolic transition between roles that now defines your existence. The measuring instruments wait in your special bag, cold metal contrasting with the heat of the earth still present on your skin. Agnes watches this transformation with an unreadable expression, her eyes following your movements as you literally change hats to take on your official role. Be fair but not foolish, she advises briefly, simple words carrying layers of meaning like an onion being peeled. The path to the inspection point seems different today, even though it is physically identical to the one you have traveled hundreds of times before. Other inspectors are already in position when you arrive, their faces showing a familiar combination of official boredom and constant vigilance. Godwin nods briefly, a minimal acknowledgement that nonetheless represents significant progress since your early days in this role. Queues are already forming, peasants with carts and baskets waiting for an assessment that will determine how much they will keep and how much they will hand over. Time takes on a strange quality during inspections, simultaneously dragging like a snail and racing like a frightened hare, every moment crucial. Your hands work confidently now, measurements precise but not overly rigorous, finding a balance that few could achieve without your unique perspective. The sun tilts westward, shadows lengthening like concerns. About the coming winter, every moment of remaining light precious beyond words, faces pass before you in an endless procession, some tense, others resigned, all carrying the weight of invisible family expectations. You calculately recognize small irregularities, occasional stones among the grains, slightly elevated moisture, impurities that could justify punitive discounts. Your records reflect balanced judgment, numbers dancing on the fine line between obedience to your master and the survival of your neighbors. Godwin occasionally checks your work, his shrewd eyes searching for suspicious patterns, finding only careful consistency that defies specific criticism. The afternoon advances inexorably, piles of separated grains growing in proportions that will determine the fate of entire families in the coming months. Your back hurts differently now, not from the curvature of the harvest, but from the tension of constant decisions under surveillance. The smell of grain permeates his clothes, hair, and skin, a bittersweet scent of the season that will linger for days, regardless of washing. When the sun finally touches the horizon, signaling the mandatory end of inspections, exhaustion weighs on his bones like molten metal. The records are checked one last time, sums calculated, final numbers determining quantities that will remain in the village and depart for the castle. Godwin examines the totals with a neutral expression, years of experience making him unreadable even to the most observant eyes. Acceptable, he finally declares, a single word carrying enough approval to allow the breath you didn't even realize you were holding to escape. The return to your own field occurs in an altered state of consciousness, your body moving automatically while your mind processes the complex day. Thomas and his helpers have worked well, a significant portion of your harvest already cut and organized into neat bundles awaiting transport. Agnes supervises the loading of the small cart, her eyes alert, ensuring that no ears of corn are wasted in the meticulous process. His wife offers you fresh water as you approach, simple gestures communicating her understanding of the double exhaustion you carry. Twilight transforms the partially harvested fields into a dreamlike landscape, cut stubble casting long shadows like memories of what once was. The work continues until darkness makes it dangerous to handle sharp tools, reluctance to stop evident in every slow movement. The cart returns to the hut, heavy with the tangible results of months of effort, each sack representing future meals that will ward off hunger. Dinner is eaten in almost reverent silence, bodies too exhausted for conversation, minds processing the day's meaning on multiple levels. Agnes finally breaks the silence with a practical observation. We need to finish before the rain comes. I can smell it in the air. You nod, noticing now that you had already unconsciously detected the subtle changes that precede a storm: altered pressure, increased humidity, shifting wind. The shared forecast transforms plans for tomorrow, adding urgency to the already frenetic pace of work required during harvest. Your wife silently organizes storage space, sweeping, checking the roof, preparing a place where the grains will dry, protected from destructive moisture. Tiredness weighs on. Your eyelids, like millstones, each blink longer than the last, your body begging for rest. The nighttime sounds of the village filter through the walls of the hut. Other similarly exhausted families preparing for the crucial days ahead. The harvest transforms time as alchemy transforms metals, normal days becoming precious, each hour containing work that will sustain future months. You fall asleep sitting up, your head finally yielding to the unsustainable weight of consciousness, your body surrendering to the fundamental need for recovery. Agnes and his wife exchange rare glances of mutual understanding, silently collaborating to move you to the mattress without disturbing your precious sleep. Night envelops the hut like a protective cloak, darkness momentarily obscuring the differences between inspector and peasant, authority and servant. Tomorrow will bring a continuation of this complex dance between roles, responsibilities, and needs, each day of the harvest. Crucial for future survival, deep sleep offers brief oblivion, the body regaining strength while the mind unconsciously organizes experiences into understandable patterns. And so another day ends in the eternal cycle that has defined human existence since the first farmers, sowing, cultivating, harvesting, surviving. The moon watches through the small window, its silvery light indifferent to human complexities, a silent witness to countless harvests throughout the centuries. Do the clouds gathering on the horizon know the power they have over lives as small as ours? Dawn brings confirmation of Agnes's predictions, the eastern sky briefly glowing red before clouds swallow it completely. You wake with instinctive urgency, your body responding to the climatic threat even before your conscious mind fully processes the situation. The air carries palpable moisture, heavy with the promise of rain that could turn harvest celebration into desperate struggle. Agnes has already organized extra baskets and waterproof covers lined with animal fat, practical foresight manifested in tangible preparations. Her wife prepares a substantial breakfast, sacrificing precious reserves to provide the energy needed for the intense work ahead. The hut vibrates with silent tension, every movement economical and purposeful, words limited to what is absolutely necessary for efficient coordination. Outside, the entire village awakens with the same frenetic energy, everyone aware of the race against the elements that has determined survival for generations. The field lies like an unfinished game board, part harvested neatly, the rest still standing in temporary defiance. The wind picks up as you walk hurriedly, the first gusts exploring the terrain like scouts before an invading army. Other fields show equally intense activity, entire families, mobilized regardless of age, everyone contributing as their abilities allow. Thomas is already waiting in his field, other helpers gathered with determined expressions, the community temporarily unified by the shared threat. The problem crystallizes. Immediately harvesting, inspection, and storage must occur simultaneously, tasks that are normally sequential now competing for limited time. The consequences of failure are amplified exponentially. Wet grain rots. Incomplete records mean punishment, inadequate storage. Guarantees devastating losses. A partial solution emerges organically. Division of responsibilities. Temporary trust, sacrifice of perfection in favor of completion. I'll harvest until noon, then inspect, you announce, a pragmatic decision recognizing the impossibility of serving all roles adequately. Agnes nods, approvingly, instantly reorganizing her mental schedule to maximize efficiency under the new time structure. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Your hands grip tools with an urgency that transcends usual care, each movement now balancing speed against potential waste. The sky darkens progressively, layers of clouds gathering like stacked worries, each adding weight to the looming threat. His body moves with mechanical efficiency, muscles operating beyond fatigue through determination, fueled by a primal fear of hunger. Sweat drips despite the cooler air, intense effort generating heat that quickly evaporates in the growing breeze. The grains fall into baskets like precious moments slipping through a broken hourglass, each one valuable but insufficient in the face of need. Agnes works with surprising vigor for her age, decades of experience compensating for diminished strength through precise movements. Her wife coordinates transportation from the field to storage, organizing a constant flow that maximizes the efficiency of the fragmented process. Time folds in on itself like crumpled parchment, simultaneously too slow for necessity and too fast for the desired conclusion. Clouds now completely dominate the sky, turning day into premature twilight, diffuse light, altering perceptions of color and distance. The entire village seems to vibrate with nervous energy, like a disturbed anthill, where each individual moves with a seemingly chaotic frenzy of purpose. Occasional shouts ring out across the fields, instructions, warnings, encouragement, human language reduced to its practical essence under extreme pressure. The wind carries the first distant scent of rain, an unmistakable smell that awakens ancestral memories of shelter and protection. The field gradually shrinks, stubble replacing once proud plants, a transformation that would normally bring satisfaction but now offers only partial relief. By midday, clouds so dense they could be mistaken for dusk cast a strange light, creating shadows that seem to move independently. Godwin appears unexpectedly at the edge of the field, his grave expression communicating an urgency that transcends usual formalities. All inspectors are summoned immediately, he informs, his voice competing with the growing wind. Orders from the chief steward. The tension between conflicting responsibilities crystallizes at this moment like the final drop that overflows an already full vessel. Agnes intervenes with surprising authority. He will be there after ensuring that his own harvest is not destroyed. Godwin hesitates, internal conflict visible in his normally controlled expression, humanity momentarily overriding his official role. 1 hour, he finally concedes, his words carrying the weight of personal risk. Not a moment. More. You nod gratefully, returning immediately to work with renewed urgency, aware that the time granted represents a significant sacrifice. The harvest now becomes a battle against multiple enemies, threatening weather, dwindling time, divided responsibilities, pulling in opposite directions. Hands move almost independently of conscious will, years of practice allowing for precision even under extreme pressure. The first thunder rumbles in the distance like a final warning, low vibrations reverberating through the earth like communication between forces beyond human control. Agnes organizes protective coverings for the grain already harvested, experience allowing her to anticipate exactly how much time remains before the rain. His wife works silently coordinating final transport, each wagon trip representing future meals saved from imminent destruction. The field is now almost completely harvested, a small section painfully abandoned when time finally runs out. You hand tools to Thomas with quick instructions, the transition between roles now occurring with an urgency that eliminates ceremony. The inspection tools seem like foreign objects in hands calloused from physical labor. The mental transition as challenging as the physical. The path to the inspection point is covered at a partial run, your body protesting the additional demand after hours of intense labor. Godwin waits with barely concealed impatience, relief visible when you finally appear, your uniform drenched, indicating the onset of rain in another area. "We need to finish before the storm hits," he explains unnecessarily, gesturing to rows of anxious peasants waiting for evaluation. His hands move quickly, but precisely, each measurement now competing directly with occasional drops that herald imminent flooding. The records require additional protection from the rising humidity, a challenge that complicates a process already rushed beyond normal limits. The farmers' faces show a familiar mixture of anxiety and resignation, now intensified by the urgency of the weather-threatening months of work. You recognize every expression, having experienced both sides of the equation, empathy informing decisions that might otherwise seem purely technical. The first flash of lightning illuminates the scene in momentary supernatural clarity, freezing expressions in a vivid tableau of humanity under pressure. Thunder follows almost immediately, its proximity eliminating any doubt about how much time really remains before conditions become impossible. Measurements continue at a frantic pace, hands moving with precision that defies the circumstances, each grain counted representing tangible survival. The rain gradually increases, initially just a damp tease, eventually becoming a liquid curtain that defies efforts to keep records dry. Godwin finally declares closure when water makes measurements physically impossible, a practical decision recognizing real limits against official expectations. The remaining farmers protest briefly before acknowledging inevitability, their faces showing mental calculations of potential losses against relentless reality. You gather instruments and records with protective care, each page representing the difference between adequate subsistence and starvation for entire families. The return through the now torrential rain turns the familiar path into a dangerous adventure, mud clinging to boots like desperate hands. Your mind is divided between concern for your own field and responsibility for the soaked records you carry as a precious burden. The rain falls like divine judgment, indifferent to the human efforts below, water erasing the distinctions between inspector and peasant, authority and servant. The village has been transformed into a series of indistinct shadows through the curtain of water, occasional figures, running between shelters like substantial ghosts. His field, when finally visible, shows Thomas and his helpers finishing protecting the last crops, efficiency born of absolute necessity. Agnes directs operations from the entrance to the makeshift barn, a tiny but unmistakable figure even through the storm, her authority transcending her physical size. Relief flows through her exhausted body like the warmth of a strong drink, recognition that vital work has been completed despite the obstacles. The records are handed to Godwin under the precarious protection of an extended roof, a silent exchange carrying the weight of hard-won professional trust. The final return to the cabin takes place through rain that now seems solid in its intensity, each step requiring concentration against growing exhaustion. The door opens before you reach it, your wife apparently sensing your approach, light from the fireplace creating a welcoming silhouette against the outside darkness. Inside, warmth envelops your drenched body like a physical blessing. The contrast between the raging elements and domestic protection never so pronounced. Agnes has already prepared hot water and dry clothes, practicality overriding any remaining personal discomfort between you. Your hands tremble with fatigue that transcends the merely physical, every muscle, tendon, and nerve exhausted beyond normal limits. The hot soup placed before you seems like divine ambrosia, steam carrying aromas that promise restoration beyond simple nutrition. Conversation is minimal during the meal, energy conserved. For basic functions, unnecessary words eliminated by the economy imposed by survival. The rain continues relentlessly outside, drumming constantly against the roof as a reminder of the fragility of existence against indifferent elements. The body gradually recognizes temporary safety, tension, slowly draining away like water from clothes hung to dry near the fire. Agnes finally breaks the silence with a practical statement. We made it through, most of us. We should thank the Hog Saints for that. His wife nods in silent agreement, her eyes revealing mental calculations of provisions secured against the needs of the coming winter. Exhaustion now becomes an almost tangible entity, a physical presence pressing against a consciousness struggling to remain present. Thunder continues as background music to growing exhaustion, each distant explosion registering ever more faintly on diminished perception. You fall asleep, sitting up again, the transition between wakefulness and sleep occurring without any perceptible mark, your body simply surrendering to fundamental need. Sleep brings merciful oblivion, your mind finally freed from the constant calculations, precise measurements, and divided responsibilities that define waking existence, and so ends a harvest day like so many others throughout the centuries, the small humans struggling against vast forces, surviving through stubbornness and adaptation. The storm continues indifferent over the silent hut, water falling equally on harvested and abandoned fields, elemental justice transcending human distinctions. What remains of a man when the seasons finally complete their cycle, bringing him back to the beginning, transformed but recognizable? The days after the harvest storm unfold into a new normal, a different rhythm establishing itself like water, finding a new course. Most of the harvest was saved, a minor miracle born not of divine intervention, but of collective work and stubborn determination. You walk through the now bare field, stubble as short as a poorly trimmed beard covering the earth as it slowly prepares for its winter rest. The village granaries are fuller than feared, but less than expected, a precarious balance that defines rural survival. Agnes supervises preservation. With military precision, each vegetable, grain, and fruit processed exactly when it reaches its ideal point of ripeness. His wife has developed a new respect for her previously criticized mother-in-law. Collaboration during crisis, laying the foundation for a less antagonistic relationship. The inspection records were accepted by the chief steward with minimal review. Hard-won trust, now established as fact. Godwin offered rare, direct praise, his parsimonious words carrying additional weight precisely because of their characteristic scarcity. Life now unfolds like rough fabric being rolled up for winter storage, each day shortening, temperatures gradually dropping. You observe the changing landscape with different eyes this year, your expanded perspective allowing for a deeper appreciation of seasonal patterns. The role of inspector has brought unexpected insights, not just about measurements and records, but about people and their motivations. The cabin receives modest improvements before winter, small luxuries afforded by the extra earnings of your position of responsibility. A slightly larger window lets in more light during the shortening days. Real glass replacing translucent leather. A significant investment in comfort. Agnes initially protested against unnecessary extravagance, but she secretly appreciates the additional light for her sewing work during gloomy afternoons. If this kind of story helps you relax, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. His wife flourishes with small improvements, her spirits rising with each modest refinement that transforms basic survival into a fuller life. The neighbors gradually adjust to his unique position, his inspector status now accepted as an established fact rather than a suspicious anomaly. Old E. Thomas visits occasionally, conversations evolving beyond immediate needs to broader reflections on community and interdependence. The village prepares for winter as a collective organism, each family contributing to shared preparations that will benefit everyone during the isolated months ahead. The problem you face now is different. No longer immediate survival, but navigating expanded identity and heightened expectations. The consequences of this evolution manifest themselves in new invitations, additional responsibilities, and an expanded social horizon that would previously have been unimaginable. Partial solution emerges naturally, the gradual integration of previously contradictory roles, a synthesis that honors origins while embracing possibilities. Father João observes your transformation with particular interest, conversations after Sunday Mass becoming more substantial and mutually respectful. You have found a rare balance, he comments one Sunday, simple words carrying approval that he values more than any lordly praise. Agnes surprisingly agrees, a shared observation during a late dinner representing recognition she would never express directly. The first snow falls on a clear, late autumn morning, large flakes descending lazily like white feathers from a giant bird. You watch through the new window, a contemplative moment allowed by the reduced workload of the cold months just beginning. Your wife joins you silently, her shoulder touching yours, a simple contact communicating a partnership that transcends words and external circumstances. The immaculate white transforms the familiar landscape into something magical, a temporary covering hiding the differences between noble and peasant fields. The silence that accompanies thick snow has an almost sacred quality, as if the whole world has collectively paused its breathing. Agnes interrupts your contemplative moment with characteristic pragmatism. Firewood doesn't bring itself in, and fire doesn't feed on admiration. You smile inwardly, recognizing the fundamental truth that defines rural existence. Beauty always subordinate to necessity, contemplation limited by survival. Winter days establish a new rhythm, with reduced outdoor work allowing attention to long-delayed indoor repairs. Your hands, normally busy with soil and crops, now work wood and leather, different but equally essential skills. The position of inspector brings reduced responsibilities during winter, with occasional stock counts and quality checks replacing daily inspections. The extra time allows for the rare luxury of personal development, improved writing skills, more complex calculations, and deeper administrative knowledge. Agnes watches these studies with silent approval, occasionally offering surprisingly insightful advice on manorial politics and administrative expectations. My father served as a scribe before the plague took him, she reveals surprisingly. Decades of silence about the past finally broken. This revelation sheds much light on her demanding personality, high standards born not only of temperament, but of family legacy. His wife absorbs these newly shared stories eagerly, deeper understanding, smoothing the rough edges of a relationship previously characterized by constant conflict. The hut, during long winter nights, transforms into an unexpectedly harmonious space. Three distinct personalities finding mutual accommodation. Like instruments in a small ensemble, occasional snowstorms completely isolate the village. Days of forced confinement, testing the limits of tolerance and carefully stored provisions. You discover surprising pleasure in these imposed breaks. Time for reflection representing a luxury rarely available during months of incessant work. Life now stretches out before you like a path newly revealed after a snowfall, familiar in general direction, but offering a slightly altered passage. The balance found between previously separate worlds, peasant and authority, labor and administration, individual and community, brings unexpected satisfaction. Agnes, always perceptive despite her rough exterior, recognizes this transformation. With her characteristically direct observation, you have found your place among places. His wife flourishes in this changed environment, expanded responsibilities allowing expression of intelligence and abilities previously limited by restrictive circumstances. Winter advances inexorably, each day bringing an imperceptible but measurable increase in light after the solstice, a coded promise of coming renewal. Provisions dwindle at a calculated pace, each meal representing a careful balance between immediate need and sustainability until the next harvest. You now understand cycles, not just as a farmer observing seasons, but as a manager considering years and broader trends. The knowledge you have gained brings both power and responsibility, each decision informed by a deeper understanding of consequences beyond the immediate. The nights gradually shorten, each additional minute of light received with an appreciation that only those who depend directly on the sun can understand. The earth beneath deep snow waits patiently, invisible processes preparing a rebirth that seems miraculous only to the unwary observer. You begin plans for the coming spring, mentally mapping fields incorporating the combined knowledge of farming practice and management theory. Agnes contributes wisdom, accumulated over decades of observing weather patterns and yields, her experience complementing your newly acquired, expanded perspective. Your wife develops improved systems for storage and preservation, practical intelligence, finding expression in small but significant innovations. The collaboration that emerged out of necessity during harvest now flourishes intentionally. Three minds tackling future challenges with a breadth previously impossible. Time passes like a river under ice, continuous movement invisible on the surface, constant power underlying apparent stagnation. The sun gains noticeable strength, heat gradually melting surface layers of snow, revealing dark earth in irregular patterns like an emerging map. You notice tiny first signs of green, determined sprouts pushing through partially frozen soil, living testimony to persistence. The life that now stretches out before you is no simpler than before, perhaps more complex, but significantly richer. The balance found is neither perfect nor permanent, requiring constant adjustments like a dancer responding to an ever-changing melody. Agnes rarely mentions her late husband now, previously constant comparisons replaced by more direct engagement with present reality. Her wife carries new confidence, her relationship with her mother-in-law transformed from antagonism to mutual respect, benefiting all who share their limited space. The village gradually accepts her unique position not as an anomaly, but as a natural evolution, a necessary bridge between traditionally separate worlds. You understand now that each role she plays does not dilute the others, but adds dimension, a richer fabric created from diverse threads. The knowledge she gained as an inspector informs her decisions as a farmer. Her experience as a worker guides her judgments as a partial authority. Spring approaches with renewed promise, not just of a repeating agricultural cycle, but of expanded existence within familiar limitations. Life that once seemed predetermined as furrows in a plowed field now reveals unimagined possibilities within existing structures. Agnes observes these changes with an understanding that transcends words, her life experience, allowing her to recognize genuine transformations beyond superficialities. His wife blossoms beside him, mutual growth creating a more balanced partnership, each contributing complementary strengths to their shared existence. And so, as the final snow melts away to reveal soil prepared for new planting, you too emerge transformed from literal and figurative winter. Life continues its inexorable flow, as always, eternal cycles of planting and harvesting, work and rest, struggle and acceptance. But within these patterns as old as the earth itself, new possibilities emerge for those willing to occupy the spaces in between. You observe fields waiting to be sown, familiar land now seen through eyes that carry the dual vision of farmer and manager. The seasons will continue their eternal cycle, indifferent to small human transformations. But within this unchanging framework, individual lives find new meaning, and so you move forward into another year, carrying the knowledge that life rarely offers simple choices or pure identities. The balance you have found is not a final destination, but a continuing journey, each day offering new challenges to your hard-won wisdom, Agnes, your wife, and you form an unlikely but functional unit, each transformed by encounters with others and shared circumstances. Life unfolds as it always has, one day after another, each bringing necessary work, inevitable challenges, and small joys. And in this seemingly ordinary existence, you have found a profound truth that few fully understand. Meaning lies not in greatness, but in balance.